Hello friends, it's Dave here from SaveDex. Welcome to another discussion video. We're going to talk about our favourite horror games as it's Halloween. And to join me with this one, we've got two very special guests. We've got Glen from SwitchUp.
Hello mate, alright.
And we've got Geoffrey from the Indie Gaming Guild.
Hey, what's going on guys? Thanks for having me.
Thank you to the two of you for joining me on this. Now, obviously I wanted you two here because I know you're both horror fans. And so we're going to talk about what our favourite horror games are over the years. And before we do that, we'll do a little general sort of meet and greet. Just sort of say, what games have you been playing in the last few days to get in the Halloween spirit, maybe?
Alright guys, well my name is Geoffrey with the Indie Gaming Guild if you're unfamiliar. Thank you Dave and Glenn for having me. It's awesome to be able to talk with both of you about our favorite horror experiences given the time of year we're recording this. It's just about Halloween, which is always a fun time. So the week leading up to Halloween I've been playing, so I just bought Fatal Frame Maiden of Black Water, so don't spoil it in this video because I've never played it. I wasn't one of the 5 people that owned a Wii U, so I never played it. But I'm excited to dive into that this week. But otherwise, I've been playing a lot of the newly released Dusk on Nintendo Switch, that first-person, old-school horror shooter, kind of like Quake and Doom and Hexen. So I've been playing some of that for the channel and just for fun. Other than that, my wife and I were playing through a couple games, Costume Quest, which I'll touch on later, just to get in the spooky Halloween spirit. So that's kind of what I've been rocking.
Cool. Well, I know me and Glenn were 2 of the people that owned a Wii U. Don't know who the other 3 were. So Glenn, what have you been playing lately?
I've had 3 games kind of on the burner this week, 2 of which are horror games. The one that isn't is American Fugitive, which actually is a really cool, like top-down, old-school GTA type game.
Nice.
Picked it up for fairly cheap in a shop, and been playing a bit of that. But horror-wise, I've also been playing Maiden of Blackwater, although it's called Project Zero over here, not Fatal Frame. I did play it on the Wii U previous to that. Reviewed it for the channel the other day, and I've also been playing. I bought the Zombies Ate My Neighbours and Ghoul Patrol double pack on the Switch.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's on sale at the minute, so I picked that up, and I've been having a little blast with that. I had Ghoul Patrol as a kid. I never actually played Zombies until years later, but I've been having a little go on that.
Yeah, I played Zombies quite a bit on the Wii Virtual Console. Very fun game, that one. Yeah, I sort of downloaded a bunch of sort of horror style games on Game Pass, but Alien Isolation was one I started. I haven't actually met the alien yet, but it's gotten a bit scary. At one point, I've got a Fitbit style watch, and at one point during it, it was quite a dark, tense bit, and then suddenly my watch vibrated at me, telling me to take a breath, and obviously it measures my pulse. So I'm like, I look forward to seeing, looking at my record of my pulse while playing this game. Actually, be interesting to see. And I know you've beaten that game, Glenn.
Yeah, I played it originally on the 360, and I played it again on the Switch and finished it on both. It's a great game. The thing is, because obviously when we were younger, we're all of a similar age, movie tie-ins, licensed games were generally rubbish, weren't they? Do you know what I mean? But because these days they generally pick up a license that's years old and then just build a story around it, the quality of some of these games is fantastic. And this one, just in terms of the story, how it fits into the lore of the Alien franchise, it's brilliant, and the suspense it builds is fantastic.
And just the fact that I don't know Alien that well, but is this Sigourney Weaver's daughter or something you're playing as?
Yeah, so basically in terms of the films, you had Alien, where Sigourney Weaver was on the Nostromo, and then Alien 2, which was set, I think it was about 50 odd years later, because she went into cryosleep and she came back to Earth and realised that she'd kind of missed her whole daughter's life. Do you know what I mean? So this is set 15 years after the first film, where Amanda Ripley, I think her name is a young woman, and is obviously her mum's been missing for 15 years, and then they find the distress call from the Nostromo, or the black box, and she goes off with the retrieval team to see what it's all about, to see what's happened to her mum.
But yeah, I am enjoying it so far, what I've been playing of it, and I look forward to carrying on with it. But so that's basically a little catch up of what we've been doing this week so far. So we're going to go through what our favourite games are. We've each picked 2 games actually 4 overall, 2 of them being mature horror games, and 2 of them being more cartoony, spooky games, not necessarily horror, but they could be. So before we get into that, we've got I've written down 4 honourable mentions we've all stated out. So the first one is, we've already mentioned it, Project Zero or Fatal Frame. Is there anything you guys want to add about that one?
So for me, so over here in America, it's called Fatal Frame, but I know, I always forget it's called Project Zero elsewhere. So that game for me, it's funny. I've played, except for Maiden of Blackwater, which I will play, I've played all of the previous ones. So Fatal Frame or Project Zero, the original ones came out on PlayStation 2, the original Xbox, way back in, I think 2000, 2001, 2002. And I remember being like 16 or 17, probably shouldn't have been playing too much terrible stuff like that, because they're very, very scary. And I remember picking it up, and I could barely get through an hour or two, because for those that don't know, the whole mechanic behind it is that it's a third-person survival horror game, similar to Resident Evil or Silent Hill, but your whole business with the game is using what's called your camera obscura, and that camera is like spirit photography, and you have to exorcise the ghosts in these mansions and haunted places, which means you have to be like up close and personal, and it's just a terrifying game. The sound design, and it's one that I never actually even beat any of them yet, so I just love them because I love the aesthetic that they bring. It's very much that J horror, Japanese horror. So anyway, that's just one that for me was really stood out in the past.
Yeah, no, I'd go along with that. It's, sorry, Dave, I was just going to say that the thing about this series is because the premise is obviously ghosts, and as Geoffrey said there, that the Japanese horror, it's incredibly unique. You have so many zombie games and this and that, but that ghost premise is just so scary. Project Zero 2, I played that on the Wii, and there were 3 games in my life that have genuinely creeped me out, and that is one of those 3 games. It's so ridiculously scary at times. The newest, the one we've been talking about, Blackwater, isn't quite on that level in terms of scares for me, but they're still fantastic games.
Cool. So I've never actually played one of these games. I'm looking forward to this one, but the fact that it's physical only in Asia, I think you said.
Yeah.
Because exactly, it's like I'd prefer a physical for something like this, but it is what it is, isn't it?
The thing is, it doesn't have English on the cartridge either. It's going to become via a patch later, which is just a bit lame, to be honest.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
interesting.
So at least they will put it in English eventually.
It is going to have a patch. I think it's end of November time, but I don't know why it can't have just been on the the cartridges standard. Yeah.
Huh. True. Very strange.
So another franchise, which I've only played one game in this franchise, House of the Dead. Have you had any experience with that one, Geoffrey?
Very, very little. I remember playing those games back in the day at the local arcades and things like that, but it's not a game that I have any nostalgia or particular memories of, so I'd rather you guys speak on it if you have that.
I've played House of the Dead Overkill on the Wii. Have you done that one, Glen?
Yeah, I've played Overkill. I finished that one on the Wii, as you say, and I played a lot of 2, probably most of 2, a bit of 3 as well. 2 is a fantastic game. I actually had that on the Wii too, and playing it with the Zapper. My wife and I used to kind of make a point of playing through that one. There were so many good light gun games on the Wii, horror games, and that was kind of one of the staple games that we returned to quite often. Great franchise. There's one coming to the Switch, isn't there? They're remaking one of them.
Yes,
I forget which one now.
They are. Is it 2 and 3, or is it Overkill?
It's not Overkill. It may be 2.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Alright, it's one of the few Wii games that I did. I beat it all the way through with the Zapper the whole time, and my main memory of this one is I have a friend who doesn't really play those sorts of games usually, and I showed it to him, and he played through the first stage, and I could sort of tell that he wasn't really enjoying it because he's not into like zombie and stuff like that, and then after he finished the level he just goes, I can see how that could be addictive. Good review, I thought. So staying on zombies, next we're going to talk about Dead Rising, which is a very fun game I found. Have you played that one, Geoffrey?
Off and on a little bit. It's crazy how many there have been. I know there hasn't been a newer one recently, or 2 recently. And I had an Xbox 360, so I played that more over PlayStation 3 back in the day in that generation. So I remember dipping into the first one and the second one a little bit. The whole zombie thing isn't really my cup of tea. That stuff doesn't really scare me, I guess, or in that sense. That being said, if it was in real life, I would probably just run and cry. But in a game form, it was fine. I like the arcadey nature of being able to just pick up weapons, combine them, and go slay some zombies. But it wasn't my personal cup of tea. I don't really have any like fondness for it, but I think it was a fun testament to just how many you can have on screen and just kind of mow them down. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think of it.
I've not played much of Dead Rising. Actually, Dave, you introduced me to the series. I came to visit you one time, and you had an Xbox. I didn't have one at the time, and you showed me the first game with kind of the open shopping centre or the shopping mall, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it was, obviously I think I had a Wii at the time, so it kind of blew my mind seeing a game like that. But I've played. You had Dead Rising 2, but then there was like a small Xbox Live game based on Dead Rising 2. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was like a demo before Dead Rising 2 came out.
Kinda,
I think it's called like Case. I think it's like Case Zero
Case
or
Zero,
Case West or something.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was about to say I almost said Project Zero, but that's a different game.
Yeah, no, I played that one through. I think you got like 200 achievements out of it, well, 200 score, and and I did get Dead Rising 2. I bought it. You know what it's like though? It's sat on my shelf like sealed forever for the rest of the time. I just haven't played it,
Yeah, my story, because Dead Rising, because at the time I was toying between Xbox 360 or PS3, which one to get, and when I saw Dead Rising, and it was an Xbox exclusive at the time, and that's one of the things that swayed me towards that console.
Oh,
and,
okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a shopping mall. It's kind of like Dawn of the Dead inspired, I think. And
yeah, definitely.
You could use anything to kill the zombies, and I really liked that. And I never beat the game, but it's one of them, kind of like when I played GTA. I just love to muck around in it rather than actually do the missions. And I remember there's an achievement on it because it says the town's population is like, I think it's like 3,000 and something zombies, and
no, it's like 53,000.
Oh, is it that many? Oh, wow, okay.
It's like 53,9 something or other. It's like a crazy odd number.
Yeah. But anyway, there was an achievement to kill that number of zombies, and I decided to go for that, but it's very time consuming. And do you remember when in 2010 World Cup, when England played Germany?
I do, unfortunately,
yeah. I actually did that achievement while watching that match.
That was better than watching the game, to be fair. We were rubbish that day, so...
Yeah, because all I did was I jumped in a car, drove a place where there'd be lots of zombies, killing a large number, then turning around, then driving back, and just did that over and over again. Because I'd resigned myself to watch this football match, so I was like, while I'm doing this, I'll just do this time-consuming thing. But yeah, Dead Rising 2, I got that on PS3, and it is, like you said, it's sitting on my shelf, not used. So
not played, yeah.
Okay, so another one I've put on the honourables was a game called Alan Wake, which Glen said you have interest in but not played it.
Yeah, it's the exact same story as Dead Rising 2. I bought it back in the day and just never got around to playing it. And it's one that over the years, there were two that I bought very similar time. You had Alan Wake and you had Deadly Premonition, and I played one of them, being obviously Deadly Premonition, and just didn't get around to the other. And I think both are quite revered now. Maybe Alan Wake more so on a technical level, whereas Deadly Premonition is more of a guilty pleasure. But it's one I kind of regret not having played, but it's since had a remaster or a re-release, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that just came out a week or so ago. Updated remastered version, so it's kind of giving it a new lease on life and maybe testing the waters for a full-on sequel, potentially one day for it.
Yeah, nice. That would be good.
Nice. Have you played it, Geoffrey?
I have. I love Alan Wake. Yeah, again, playing Xbox 360, it was an exclusive. Obviously not anymore with the remaster, but it was a Microsoft exclusive. And it's, if you're familiar at all with, Remedy Entertainment, who more recently have made things like Control, Alan Wake it's a phenomenal game. It's campy. There is some horror moments. You basically play as the titular character Alan Wake, who's a writer, and his writings come to life, and that doesn't spoil anything. That's just the opening of the game. And basically it very much takes place in that Twin Peaks sort of ambiance and vibe, the northwestern Seattle, United States, foresty. It just has that creepy, outdoorsy, spooky atmosphere, and the story itself has, I think, a lot of those campy moments that, Glenn, you said Deadly Premonition has a similar vibe, probably taken a little more seriously here, I guess. But everyone should play that if you like a third-person horror game. It's cheesy at times, but it's very, very fun.
Is it on Game Pass?
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, cool. I'll check that out then. Okay, so before we get to our next category, which is favourite cartoony spooky games, there was a question I wanted to propose to you, and Glen reminded me of it a little while ago. When you said about the game that was one of the 3 that genuinely creeped you out.
Yeah.
What were the other 2?
Okay, so the first one was Project Zero 2. The first one chronologically was actually Resident Evil 2. Which I know you want to touch on the Resi series at some point, so I won't go mad on it. But I bought it, and I'd never played it. I knew all about it. I just didn't have a PlayStation. So when this came to the N64, the second one, that's when I got on board with the series properly. And I remember playing it like the dead of night. And there's a bit very early on in the game where you walk past the windows in the police station, and the zombies put their hands through, and it made me jump. Yeah. You know the bit I mean, and it made me jump, and I walked past them, and your heart's racing, and it calmed down, and then I went to walk back the same way again, because I was kind of lost, and I thought it's not going to do it again, surely, and it did it a second time, and I was like, do you know what, I've had enough for tonight, I'll play it again tomorrow. But the other one, which is a much more recent game, is Outlast.
Right.
That's fair.
The first, half an hour of that game, I mean, I don't mind admitting this, I don't scare easy. I've watched a lot of horror, I've played a lot of horror in my time, but that first half an hour of that game, I just felt dirty playing it. I felt like it was just rank, it was just horrible. This atmosphere that it built up, I could feel my skin crawling as I was playing it. I felt like I had bugs crawling over me, do you know what I mean? It was just it's just nasty. And a very good game, and it kind of is like all horror games. I'm afraid at some point you get used to the mechanics and the fear factor, and it kind of subsides a little bit, but that first half an hour was truly terrifying.
Yeah, I definitely echo that, Glenn. That game I know exactly that feeling you're saying. It's so hard to progress through just because of the level of grime and over the top gore. It's just a seedy game, and you do feel that. So they did a good job at that, creating that feeling.
Oh, very much. And you're bang on. Seedy is the word for it. It just has that feel to it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've never heard of it, but I kind of want to check it out.
It's on sale on the Switch now, Dave. Get on the Switch now. It's about £3.
Okay, fair enough.
Be prepared for a lot of disgustingness.
Yeah.
That could be a Halloween live stream, okay. Okay, so Geoffrey, same question to you. What's the scariest game? Doesn't even have to be horror, but scariest game or game moment?
So Outlast would be my runner-up, but so the game for me, and a lot of people, I harp on this game, a lot of people don't talk about it, which really, really frustrates me, because it's actually, in my little humble opinion, one of the best horror games. If any of you have heard of it, it's called Infliction Extended Cut. Have either of you heard of it?
No, I've never heard of that one, no.
Okay, so, Glenn, I know since you mentioned you liked the Outlast idea, but it was sometimes too much. Infliction basically takes place, it's sort of like the whole, it takes place around that sort of idea, like how PT, the playable teasers for Silent Hill was all about a looping area and a ghost following you, if you're familiar with that. So Infliction is basically, it was created by one guy. It's a first-person horror game that takes you through this house, and you're being stalked by this terrifying entity, basically, but it's this very dark, it does go down some dark, demonic routes, so it's pretty heavy subject material that it goes down, but the audio design in this game called Infliction is absolutely unnerving. So it took me about 4 months to finish the game, not because it's hard, it's not a hard game, but it's the way there's so much oppressive nature to it, because you hear these little subtle sounds and these voices and these little creaks, and it doesn't sound like that would be scary, but the way that it uses sound to envelop you, as well as the atmosphere and this dark demonic story, I literally could only play it for 15-20 minutes at a time because it was that oppressive. So what I would say is, if you like Outlast but don't like that, like we said, seedy griminess, Infliction is a great one. Definitely find it. It's on Switch as well.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'll give that a look. Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So for me, there's a couple that we'll talk about later, being Resident Evil 2 Remake, which I'll touch on the moment later on. It's Eternal Darkness, which I know we're going to talk about later. But actually, for me, and I'm saying this unironically, but for me, the scariest or rather creepiest game I've ever played is Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. because
okay.
that moon is the scariest thing I've ever seen in a game, honestly. And it's not just that, it's just the whole atmosphere of the game, and the fact that it's not even trying to be a horror game, it's a Zelda game, but they've just nailed that creepy, unsettling atmosphere, especially when you go to the canyon later on, and you've got that eerie music, and Skull Kid wearing that mask, and it has his theme playing, it just sends a chill down my spine, really. So.
Dave, you might want to avoid Outlast and Infliction then if you thought that was scary. just throwing that out there.
I was young at the time. Okay, so next category is favourite cartoony spooky games. We've chosen 2 each. So ones that might not necessarily be scary, but have like a horror style but cartoony that kids could enjoy maybe, or maybe not. So Geoffrey, what's your first one?
Yeah, my first one, I love this game. It's called Costume Quest. There's 2 games in the series. I'm specifically talking about the first one. So Costume Quest came out, I believe, in 2010. It was an Xbox Live arcade exclusive, and it's from Double Fine. So Double Fine are the same people that made Psychonauts and those kind of things, and some other adventure games. But Costume Quest, you play as this brother and sister, Ren and Reynold, and it's essentially, if you could like distill and boil down what that feeling of like being a kid during Halloween is, that's what Costume Quest is. It's very much this lighthearted, very silly affair where you basically just have to take on this dark witch, and you have to save Halloween, and you actually go trick-or-treating from door to door, which leads into these like light turn-based RPG battles where the costumes you wear in the game, like a superhero, wizard, whatever, things like that, are your characters in the battles. And it's just this fun like coming-of-age story, but for like, it'll just make you feel like a kid again going trick-or-treating. It's very much that feeling, and if you've grown up having that like I did, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I actually just finished playing through with my wife the first and second one because she doesn't like horror games and I do. It was a great one for us to play together for the Halloween season. So have either of you played Costume Quest?
It's a compromise game for you.
Yeah.
I played it on the Xbox 360, as you said, years ago now. Kind of come across it by accident and really enjoyed it, actually. Yeah, you're spot on. And it's actually the first game I ever bought DLC for. It had like an extra chapter or something that you could purchase. And I enjoyed it so much that I bought the DLC for it. But yeah, great game. Like you say, you wear the costumes and then you kind of transform into the actual whatever it is that your costume is, which is quite an interesting concept.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say it's like Xbox exclusive because I've tried to find it on. It's not on Game Pass, but the sequel is.
Yeah, the sequel's on Game Pass. I don't know why because the first one, I don't know why it's not on Game Pass, but the second one's still very good. It's just it doesn't match the charm. And Glenn, you know from playing it, the charm of the first one is just you can't match that in terms of that Halloween feeling. But
yeah, definitely.
You can find it though, Dave, if you download it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've downloaded the second one, but I've not got around to it yet.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes. Okay, so Glenn, your Glenn's cartoony game.
Mine are not. I wouldn't say mine are for kids. They just happen to be pixel art, which is kind of when you said cartoony, that's what I went with.
I say.
But the first one is definitely very light-hearted though, and that's Maniac Mansion.
Yes.
So this came out. It was back in the 80s. It was late 80s, I believe.
And it's NES, isn't it?
It was on the NES, and it was on. I think it was on home computers as well. And it was from Lucasfilm. You know, they did like the Monkey Islands and whatnot as well.
Yes.
I believe this was before then, but you know what it's like. Your memory starts to play tricks on you. But the concept of it is it's very 80s in some respects, but it also plays homage to kind of your B movies of your 50s, you know, your horror B movies. Yeah. And the premise is like you try to save your girlfriend from this mansion, and like a meteor crashed 20 years before, and it's turned the residents of this mansion, it's like a scientist, I think, crazy. It's turned them crazy, like a scientist and his family. And you have like 6 characters, and you can choose who goes with you, and depending on the actions you take, it will change. You know, like characters can die or can get captured, and then that will change the ending that you have. It's just it's a point and click game. I should have said that, made that explicit. But it's I just loved the humour of it. Is fantastic to start with. Like kind of the world it builds is really good as well, and just for the time, you know, like having multiple characters that you could choose from and having it determine the ending that you get as well, it's just very unique. And it had a part, it's quite an infamous part, where you could put a hamster in a microwave. I don't know if you've ever heard about this.
Jeez.
Yeah, and if you, I mean, you know, spoilers I suppose, but the game's yonks old now, but if you do that and then you get caught by the owner of the hamster, then you get killed. So that's just one of the ways that you could die. But the Nintendo, the NES version you mentioned, Dave, had like quite a few cuts made to it. Obviously, you know, Nintendo, you know, especially back then, would censor their games or censor games on their systems, and there were quite a few. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly right. And this was before that, but a lot of the, you know, a bit of the gore, but also just some of the subject material. You know, things that were in the game were changed. I think there was a message on like a bathroom wall that was something like, "For a good time, phone this number," and that was taken out as well. But yeah, no, good game, very good game.
Apparently, it was adapted into a TV show.
I heard that. Yeah,
Really?
I've never seen it, but I think is it Eugene Levy or Eugene Levy?
Yeah,
you say
yeah.
He was in it or had something to do with it, didn't he?
He wrote
Jim's
it.
dad. He wrote
Yeah,
it. Okay.
true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Glen, is Maniac Mansion? So I'm trying to remember. So I know there was like some old point-and-click games on PC that kind of kickstarted or helped kickstart the horror genre. I know like The Seventh Guest was one, Alone in the Dark. Was Maniac Mansion, do I remember right, was that one of those like titular games that helped to kind of kickstart the horror, or am I not thinking that right?
Now I'm not a huge, I'm not big on point and click, so I might get this wrong, but as far as I remember, it had, they created a system called the Scum system, SCUMM, and they created this system for this game and then used it in their games moving forward. So not so much about horror, but in terms of point and click games, it was quite a big deal because it was basically the verb object motif that goes through a lot of point and click games. You know, use this here sort of thing. You know, put this there. I think it was the first game that used that model, and that was very influential in point and click games. You know.
Okay.
Just to point out, the acronym SCUM SCUMM stands for Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Don't say you don't learn anything online.
I knew that off the top of my head. I'm not looking this game up at all.
Absolutely no.
And the main house, I know this already as well. The main house is designed after Skywalker Ranch.
Oh, is it really?
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's cool.
Oh,
and I didn't realise that Day of the Tentacle is a sequel to it as well.
Yeah, we see. I played Day of the Tentacle first, and Maniac Mansion was an unlockable via Day of the Tentacle, which is how I came to play it. Yeah, so Day of the Tentacle, it makes a small reference to the first game, and the tentacle characters themselves are in Maniac Mansion. I seem to remember, but yeah, you're spot on. It is the sequel.
So Dave, what's yours? From one mansion to another, what's yours, Dave? What's your first one?
Well, yeah, true. So my mansion is Luigi's mansion, which if I was to pick one, I would go with the first one, because this comes from, although I think the third one is probably the best in the series, it's just nostalgia, isn't it? You go back to the one you had back in the day as your favourite. So I actually... This was a launch game for the GameCube, and it was like revolutionary that a Nintendo console launched without Mario, and all of them ever since then haven't launched with Mario. So this started a trend for Nintendo here. And Luigi was the star, and it was sort of like a Ghostbusters style. You go around the mansion, got to find the ghosts. There was like a puzzle element to it, working out how to take out the portrait ghosts. Now, for me, I didn't get it when it came out, but about a year later on my birthday, it was like I asked for that game and Mario Kart Double Dash, which launched on my birthday, and Mario Kart Double Dash was the one I was more excited for, but that didn't dispatch in time. So although it came out on the Friday, I didn't get it till the following Wednesday, so I had to make do with Luigi's Mansion that weekend, and I had a great weekend with it. But I know at the time people criticised it for being too short, but it is one of those games, it does sort of rank you at the end, so it has that replay value to get like it's like a high score sort of aspect to it of collecting all the money. But it's a one that's very fondly remembered now.
Yeah, I didn't play it back in the day, and for the reason I didn't was for the reason you just said. I remember because GameCube games were expensive back then. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah, they were.
I don't know if they. Yeah, they still are. You're not wrong. Yeah. I don't think they came out at the same time, but just by the time I came around to make this decision, they were both out, and that was Luigi's Mansion and Mario Sunshine.
Yeah.
And I could only afford one, and it wasn't anything to do with Mario or Luigi. I didn't really care who was in the game, but I'd heard that Luigi's Mansion was very short, so I plumped for Sunshine. I mean, these days, you know, busy adult, I'd happily take a short game, but back then it was different, you know.
Yeah,
that's fair.
It's something I was saying to Aston about the whole concept of value for money the other day was like, I value a short game more than a long game now because I'm going to see the whole game then, whereas a 50-hour game, whatever, I'm not going to see the whole game. So
exactly, yeah, exactly right.
Agreed. Yeah. Luigi's Mansion as a series is really special. I never owned a GameCube growing up. I didn't have one until later in life, but I had a good friend that he got a GameCube, he got Luigi's Mansion, so I'd like to say I was good friends with him, but it may have just been because I wanted to play Luigi's Mansion somewhere. So if I'm being honest, but I have fond memories of it was just such a fun, kind of like Costume Quest, that whimsical sort of game. But it was unlike anything we'd really seen, and starring Luigi. But it's any of the one in the series. You're right. They're all a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's very very randomly got remade for the 3DS as well. When the Switch had already been out like a year and a half, and it's like, why wouldn't they just put it on the Switch? But then they got Luigi's Mansion 3 after that.
Yeah, there's been a few times when Nintendo have done that, haven't there? They, when they could have put something on the Switch and have gone to the 3DS. Was it the Metroid game?
Yeah, Samus Returns. Yeah,
that should have
been on the Switch.
Yeah.
Oh well. So Geoffrey, your next game.
All right, so I want to apologize to anyone that's watched my channel before because I've talked about this game too much, and I think everyone is tired of hearing about it. So I'll keep it short, but Pumpkin Jack. So this, for me, again, is kind of the epitome of a fun Tim Burton-esque Nightmare Before Christmas feeling game. So essentially, Pumpkin Jack, you play as Jack, and you're basically going through a 3D platforming adventure game that you go through swamps and graveyards and castles and just all of those kind of thematic Halloween things. And it's just kind of one of those games. You beat up skeletons, you collect these red crow skulls, which means you can get some costumes. And it's basically a love letter to, if you guys ever played the medieval games from back on the original PlayStation, or like a game like Maximo Ghost to Glory, which was on PS2. It's very much that of the early 2000s era 3D platforming action games. But ironically, it's good we're recording this today, which is October 28th. They actually just released a next-gen version of Pumpkin Jack, which it was already a great-looking game, but for like Xbox Series and PlayStation 5, they upped all of the visuals even more, 60 FPS. So Pumpkin Jack, if you want that sort of again, medieval-style game from back in the day, and you like Halloween, they're like a perfect amalgamation. Have either of you played it? And if you haven't, I need to leave immediately.
Yeah, no, I've played it. It reminds me, Geoffrey, of a game. There was a PS2 game based on the film A Nightmare Before Christmas. And I can't. It had a tagline, and I can't think what the tagline was.
Was it like Oogie Boogie's Revenge or something?
Yep, that's the
honestly
one.
Can't, is that the one? I can't remember now.
Yeah,
but
that's the one.
Pumpkin Jack reminds me very much of that game.
For sure. What did you think of it? What did you think of it, Glenn? Did you? I know it's not a perfect game. It holds a special place in my heart for other reasons, but I'm curious, like from your point of view, do you like it or is it not your cup of tea?
Yeah, no, very much enjoyed it. It's nice to have those throwbacks to kind of that, I don't know, N64 into the PS2 kind of era, GameCube era. I prefer 2D platformers to 3D as a whole, but I do every so often enjoy playing a game that is such a clear throwback to that era. It's nice, and yeah, it gets its the aesthetic spot on. It gets the character is fun. I think if it had been made back then, it might be a game we were still talking about today. Because you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Agreed. Dave, what about you? Have you played it?
It's funny how you've both drawn comparisons to Nightmare Before Christmas, because that's exactly what my first thought when I saw like the trailer for this game. Because in Nightmare Before Christmas, he's Jack the Pumpkin King, isn't he?
Yeah.
So Pumpkin Jack it's right there in the name. But this for those obviously people are watching this on my channel, but on this channel every Tuesday I do a Breaking My Backlog live stream. And Pumpkin Jack was the first ever stream of that kind I did back in January, and me and Sophie beat it over 2 live streams, and we had a lot of fun with it. We were doing different voices for the characters. I did my best Snape impression for Pumpkin Jack, which went down a storm, I think. But the whole live stream's available on the second channel, Saved X live streams. It's there. But yeah, it's like it reminded me of Medieval, which is actually surprisingly a game that we're not actually talking about in this stream. Actually, no one brought this one up, but so Sophie would have brought it up if she was able to be here with us here. But yeah, so yeah, it's a very because all I liked is each level you got to a new level, you got a different weapon. And I don't know if that weapon made a difference or not, or if it was just aesthetic.
There were different, so it didn't matter which one you used. One wasn't more powerful. They just had different, like, one was like a thrusting weapon, which made it easier for the enemies in that specific world, but it didn't really matter. You could switch them out as you will for whatever one you liked more aesthetically.
And speaking of Nightmare Before Christmas, wasn't Santa in this as well?
Yes, there's like a winter Christmassy level, and they did like a Christmas update later as well, so you are correct.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so Glenn, your second cartoony, but not childy cartoony one, though. Judging by the title of this game, anyway.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, my second pick would be Splatterhouse. Probably more specifically Splatterhouse 2, to be honest. So the Splatterhouse series, you play as Rick, and you're trying to save, or in the first game at least, you're trying to save your girlfriend. I think her name was Jessica, off the top of my head.
Jennifer.
Was it Jennifer? Sorry.
Yeah, and, I'm not looking this one up. I just know that.
And I mean, back in the day, again, I didn't play this back in the day because I didn't have Sega consoles. I had the Super Nintendo at that time, and there were, I loved the Super Nintendo, but there were every so often there was a game that came across, for the Mega Drive that made you a bit jealous. Do you know what I mean? And Splatterhouse was definitely one of those games. Being a big horror fan, and Friday the 13th, obviously the character wears the hockey mask in the first game, although it evolved slightly in the later games into being more like a skull than a hockey mask. But Splatterhouse 2 is the one I enjoy the most. It's a beat 'em up essentially, and I love my beat 'em ups, but it's on a 2D plane. But it's just so brutal, you're smacking things about with a bit of 2x4 and smashing them into the wall and squelching blood on, it was just so different to anything that Nintendo players had back then. Splatterhouse 3 is quite different. It's like non-linear, and you have a time limit, and it depends on how quick you are, you get different endings, and I'm rubbish at that one. I'm just not very good at it, and I can't get anywhere with it, so I can't say I enjoy it as much, but I do like the Splatterhouse series as a whole. And even there was not a remake, I think it was a new entry, wasn't it, on the Xbox 360. It was like 2010-ish time.
I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, it was around about that time. It got a bit monotonous, but that's kind of par for the course. But I enjoyed that one as well, and it had all 3 of the other games as unlockables in it as well.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Is that how you played it?
No, I'd already played them by then, but I bought that one. I mean, I bought it because I wanted it, to be fair, but when I heard that they were within it, it kind of sealed the deal,
Cool.
Dave, are you familiar with the games? Did you play them any?
No, I think I've got the Namco Museum. Is one of them on there?
I think 1 and 2 are on there, if memory serves me right.
I've not played it much, but I'd heard of Splatterhouse before. That might have been from that.
Yeah, they were on. I mean, they're quite well known for being on the Turbo Graphics as well. But that's a console that didn't really come out over here. I think it had like a tiny sample was released in Europe, but it didn't take off. So I know it via the Mega Drive more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. This game came out on the Virtual Console, but only in North America and Japan.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we weren't allowed it.
Nope. No Splatterhouse for you, sorry.
No.
I'm curious if you this is a random side question, but for either of you, or I guess Glenn, since you played it more, I don't have any specific memories of it, but if you had to compare Splatterhouse to a game today, indie, AAA, whatever, what do you think would be like a comparison for those that aren't familiar with the series? Could you think of one? I don't know if I could.
I can't, be honest with you. I mean, the closest I can come to it, and it's not really that close, is a game called Streets of Red, which is another beat 'em up. But this is on a.
I've got that.
You know the one I mean, yeah. That's on a 3D plane. But just in terms of the pop culture references it makes, and it's got a bit of blood in it as well, a bit of gore, probably that's the closest I could think of, but there's not really anything that's close to it, you know?
That's cool. It makes it unique in its, in its nostalgia and in the way it played then, which is cool.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sort of scrolling through my Switch at the minute to try and see a game. I can't find any. No, it's unique.
Well, what's your next pick, Dave? Excited to hear what your next one is, Dave.
I'm wondering if either of you had ever heard of this game before I sent you this list. It's called Decap Attack.
Oh yeah, that was Mega Drive as well, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was.
Oh, so you do know it.
I have memories of that one as well. Yep.
Yeah, I've never played it, but I know of it.
It's fun. It's on the Sega collections now. I think on modern consoles, it is on. I think one of the Sega collections. But
oh, okay. Yeah.
Also,
now the thing is, this is a weird one for me to put on here because I haven't really played this game much, but when I was younger, I used to collect Sonic the Comic. It was called. And it was like, just a comic, fortnightly one with Sonic, and they did like other Sega properties as well, so like Streets of Rage got a series, and so did like Wonder Boy, things like that. But then they did one for Decap Attack, and they went, because obviously the one game that had come out, it didn't have a lot to go on from that, but they sort of made it very sort of Monty Python style humour to it, which I don't think the games are about at all. And when eventually characters like Knuckles and Tails were getting their own stories, and all these other Sega franchises got phased out of the comic, but Decap Attack was the one that stayed. And so it was always, you'd have 3 Sonic stories, then Decap Attack for so long, for at least 3 or 4 years of this comic's run. And for some reason this was so popular because it was so stupid and so funny. That's where my attachment to this game comes. So whenever I do sort of play this game, I think it's on the Mega Drive collection on the Switch, and I do sort of jump into it. I don't get far into it, but it is you play as his name's Chuck D. Head. You're like this Frankenstein monster who can sort of stretch his head out to headbutt, and the head is the name of the skull that you have above you that you can use as a weapon, and it's also an extra hit point as well. That's sort of like how the game works. But because of this comic, because of how stupid this comic was, I absolutely loved it. But I didn't even know it was a game until I was an adult, actually. But yeah. So Geoffrey, you've played it, yeah?
Yeah, I do. So I feel like, I don't know if you guys can attest to this. So I grew up with a Sega Genesis. That was my first console. Mega Drive, obviously, is the other name. So I can't speak to the Super Nintendo side, but I feel like the Genesis/Mega Drive did a great job at coming out with games that were a little bit off, a little bit off to the left. And what I mean by that is Decap Attack was a platformer, but a lot of parents might have looked at it and been like, oh my gosh, you can throw a head around. But then there was also Booger Man. I don't need to explain any more than that. Then there was all these kind of off-putting, but kids wanted to play them, platformers. And Decap Attack was one of those I remember playing, but I don't think I was was supposed to play it because it was throwing around a head or whatever. But I do have memories of just that kind of spooky, but yet kind of funny experience. So it's a cool one for sure.
Genesis does what Nintendo don't. There we go.
That's it, yeah.
Okay, now let's move on to our mature horror games now. We're going to get spookier. So saying the word spooky is just the least spooky thing you can do, isn't it?
You could say
it doesn't really sell it, does it? Yeah.
Spooky.
So, okay, so speaking of this is a game that's a GameCube exclusive and has just sort of disappeared since. Geoffrey, your first mature horror game.
I can't believe there hasn't been, and I know the developer or whatever went defunct a long time ago, but before I say it, I can't believe this game has never come back in some fashion. But it's Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, which, yes, was a GameCube exclusive, kind of like, Glen, what you were saying before about having a game on Nintendo that was a lot more mature than they normally do. So
yeah, definitely,
this is probably a hot take or a spicy take, but like some of these games, I never actually completed Eternal Darkness. Not because it was too scary or whatever, but I think it was just because at the time, or probably still now, I'm not smart enough to figure out a lot of the puzzles. But Eternal Darkness really was kind of your foray into... what am I trying to say? It's like your foray into, like... what's the word I'm looking for? Not psychic. Like... sanity. Thank you. Sanity is the word I'm thinking of. Into, like, sanity effects.
Isn't it?
Thank you. Yes, psychological.
Yeah.
Like psychological sanity thing. So basically, yes, this is a spoiler, but gosh, the game's been out for 20 years. You know, like the volume on your TV would look like it's turning down if you had too much of your sanity, like insanity, I guess, built up, or like it would say your save file is being corrupted. And at the time,
that was the worst one.
Yeah, but at the time, like we hadn't seen anything like that, and it wasn't the age where the internet is now, where you can quickly Google it and be like, "Oh my gosh, is this happening to anyone else?" So when these things happened, it played into the whole fabric of the story, which was like this time-bending historical story you would play throughout like Roman eras and like all these different eras on top of just exploring this spooky mansion and figuring out what's going on. So it's a really good game, but I never finished it, so I can't really speak on, I guess, the whole story, but kind of that whole Resident Evil, Silent Hill type of gameplay, but on Nintendo's format, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Just to save you from having to play through the whole game, the butler did it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny because I played this one back in the day, and you mentioned that the sanity effects that it throws at you, and one you mentioned specifically, the one I was thinking of, which is the volume on the TV, because the one that the trick that the game played on you was the exact type of volume that my TV had at the time. It was like the green bars.
No.
So it was like, it couldn't have been any more perfect. You know, every so often it would do the green bar thing, and like they'd descend downwards and the number would go down with it. And it got me every time because it was the same as my TV, and I just assumed I was sitting on the panel or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh. And then but that was a very good game. Yeah, great game.
It's funny, though, Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
The one that got me was when I entered the room and then my head suddenly exploded.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
It's funny because those sanity effects, like some of the in-game ones, like the one you just mentioned, would obviously still work today. But I feel like you said, Glenn, the volume one, TVs don't, like most don't have that sort of a volume thing. So
yeah,
I feel like playing it nowadays, people would be like, this is just weird. But yeah, at the time, it was like revolutionary for sure.
Maybe that's why they didn't bring it back.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Maybe nowadays they'll be like, we've just posted this on your Facebook.
Yeah, that would be scary. So that's a good one.
No,
that's a good one.
So one thing about this is, like I said, this is very different from me now, but I actually, not only did I beat this game, but I did all 3 endings of this one, because you choose a sort of a rune at the beginning, and that sort of dictates how the story goes for that playthrough. Like what monsters appears, and like you said, you play as several different characters, and they don't end well for these characters usually. Yeah. But the one that got me was, there's this one where you play as a monk in like a cathedral, I think it is, and at the end the red monster, if you chose that one, comes out and he just smashes you into bit, like, and you just squished. And that just sort of, I was just sat there stunned, like, and that was the end of that character's story. I was like, okay, yeah. So, okay. So, Glenn, what's your first mature horror game?
The first one I'll talk about then, maybe one that some people wouldn't know exists, to be perfectly honest, is The Thing. So it's based on John Carpenter's The Thing, the movie The Thing, which came out in 1982, I think it was. And this game is set pretty much straight after it. So have either of you seen The Thing before I talk about the game?
I have seen it, yeah.
I haven't, but I don't necessarily plan on it, so whatever you want to say, go for it.
Right, so basically...
The butler did it.
Again, yeah.
Yeah, probably.
That bloody butler. So The Thing it's a remake of a film from the 50s, which itself was based on a book. But the film is about an entity, an alien, basically, that they find buried in the ice in Antarctica, and it can replicate humans, and it's a paranoia piece about who is the thing, who is it, and no one trusts anyone else. And the game picks up, like I say, just after the film, and it had a mechanic in it where the NPCs around you would either trust you or not. And if they didn't trust you, then it would affect the way they behaved around you. They wouldn't listen to orders. They would suspect you of being the thing. They might attack you. Do you know what I mean? And it had a sanity meter in it as well, similar to what we were just talking about with Eternal Darkness. And they could kill themselves if their sanity meter dropped too low, or they could attack you. It wasn't perfect. I mean, it was quite a clunky game in some respects, but it was very unique. And with me and horror games, I don't care. I'm not looking for the perfect game, but I love it when they do something different, And
definitely.
And I loved that idea. I was a huge fan of the film anyway. And then when this game came out, I didn't buy it straight away. Again, it came out early 2000s. I might have bought it, say, mid to late 2000s. I don't remember now. Mid 2000s probably. But when I played it, the fact it continued on the story, I loved, because obviously there's never been a sequel to that film. But the fact that it did its best in video game form to replicate the idea of paranoia was just really intriguing to me. So a very good game. Yeah, that would be my first pick.
That's awesome.
When you said it follows up from the film, does it feature the surviving characters of the film?
No, basically. So I'm not going to, even though it is an old film, I'm not going to spoil it. But it picks up afterwards, where you are like a special forces team that go in to investigate what happened. It does give reasons for the end of the film, which I think are kind of accepted almost as canon, because John Carpenter endorsed the game. And I don't like what the game said about the film, but that's just a personal grievance, I suppose. I kind of liked the ending as it was, but that's another story. But it doesn't feature anyone from the film, but it does reference it.
Okay. Cool.
So I never played this game, Glenn or Dave, but I hear about it all the time on horror lists on YouTube on various channels, and every time I see it come up on underrated horror games or whatever it is, I'm always like, I need to order that, because I don't generally care for sci-fi, or I know it's not just sci-fi, but that type of a horror. But this, yeah. I keep hearing about the same things you just said about how it's revolutionary in terms of the paranoia thing, and everyone could suspect everyone. It sounds like such a cool game, but gosh, I haven't tried it yet.
I think it's, in a strange sort of way, it's probably the precursor to something like Among Us.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Just in terms of the concept, they're very different games. But yeah, it's not perfect. What it did in a very clunky early 2000s way. But I love the fact it tried to do it, because it was so perfect for what the film was about.
And one thing that's good about it, then you said about how it does something different, but it might not mechanically do well as a game. But plenty of games from that time that are good might not necessarily be good in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
But something might come out and be outstanding, but be similar to the rest of the games out. That might be more likely to be forgotten than the not as good game that does something different. So maybe now people look back seeing this as really good now.
Yeah, it's looked on very fondly now, as Geoffrey just said. I don't know how it scored back then, but I don't think it was revered then. So it probably is a case of that, Dave. But again, it kind of goes back to what we said about Alien Isolation, and I'm a big advocate of this. Is that when they take a movie franchise or a license, they don't have to rush to get a game out to support the film before it hits cinema, so there's no time constraints, and they can just look at what the film was about, and they can build a story that supports the lore and adds to it. That's when you get fantastic movie games, and The Thing, in my opinion, would definitely be one of those.
Yeah, I'd say GoldenEye came out 2 years after the film, didn't it?
Yeah, so exactly. So they could, the film was out, there was no rush, and they could just make something good,
By the way, The game got 78 on Metacritic.
All right, that's pretty good, though.
From back then, okay.
It got good reviews, so...
Oh, okay. It scored better than I thought back then, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, That's not bad.
So
yeah,
looking around 8 out of 10, aren't you there?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Okay. Yeah. So my pick, because annoyingly, I chose my two mature horror games before I'd spoken to you guys about this, and annoyingly, you both chose one of the games I was going to talk about. So I've had to dig a bit deeper because I haven't played a whole lot of mature horror games.
What I will say on that, Dave, is that was your own fault because you wouldn't let us talk about Resident Evil yet, so you had to,
Fair enough.
So, but one game I did play and I did really like was called Until Dawn, which on PS4. Now, this is a type of game I don't usually play. I wouldn't play a lot of this sort of game, but it's one I will every now and then pick one up and go for it. 'Cause it's kind of like watching a film, but you make the characters' choices, and it's sort of like like a cabin in the woods sort of scenario they're in.
Yeah.
And they're just the way. And then there's obviously there's a lot of different storylines you can do here depending on your choices, and like sometimes you can have an ending where they more of them survive and some of them they're not all gonna survive. And when we did it, only 2 of our characters died, which we were quite happy with. We weren't happy that they died, but we were happy that not more than that died. So I remember you were telling me a lot about this game, Glenn, before I got it.
Yeah, I bought this ages ago now, and I played it through with my wife because we always pick like a New Year's Eve game to see us through to the new year, and cool. This one year this was our game that we played. And it's funny, I don't want to take your time up, Dave. I know this is your game to talk about, but what you just said about the endings that you can get. The first time we played it, we got, I don't know, like a standard ending. Let's say we had 70% of the characters survived, whatever it was. And then you play it again and again, and we got the best ending where everyone survived. And then,
nice.
For some reason, you always do it this way round, where the last one you need to get, if you're going for like an achievement, a trophy or whatnot, is the bad ending where everyone dies. And then because you've done it that way round, that's the ending that almost becomes canon in your head because that's the last one you did. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. One thing about this one as well was I don't really. So obviously, looking at the plot of this is because obviously we only did one playthrough. Like, how different were the multiple playthroughs?
They could change. I mean, it depends because obviously, if a character dies quite early, then their character arc, their part of the story, just isn't in the game at all. As you would expect. So that can change it quite significantly. There is an element of perceived choice, like things like the Telltale games, like the Game of Thrones one, where you really, at the time, you really feel like what you're doing is important, but actually if you tried all the options, generally they kind of lead to a similar outcome anyway,
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So there is a tad, there's a touch of that to it, but at the same time, obviously, as I said, if a character dies, then that will change that dynamic completely, and if they stay alive, they'll be able to interact with people later on. So there is some difference in there. It's definitely worth multiple playthroughs.
Yeah, because there's this one moment in it where, not really a spoiler, where you think all this stuff's happened, but then there's a twist to reveal, they sort of went back on it, and I wondered if that sort of thing happens. I thought a few characters had died, but it turned out they hadn't. It was sort of staged at one point.
Yeah, if I'm thinking of the bit I think I'm thinking of, I'm pretty sure that happens every time because that is quite a key moment in the story. If I'm thinking of the bit you're thinking of.
And did you know that Rami Malek's in this game?
Yes, he is.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It's, the girl from Heroes was in it as well, wasn't she? I forget her name now.
Hayden Panettiere, I don't know how you say it.
That
one.
You did a better job of it than I would have done.
It's not an easy one to say.
Nice. Have you played this one, Geoffrey?
I have, yeah. I didn't want to. Yeah, you guys have already said all some of the best things about it. So I was late to the party on this. I think I played it last year, beat it in a few nights. I love this game. It's fantastic. One of the reasons I wanted a PlayStation 4 was to actually play this game because I heard so much about it. So without repeating what you guys said, it's just that it's an agonizing game if you're someone like me that can't make decisions, and then when you do, and you're like, crap, no, I don't want this, and then but you can't, like, you just can't go back on it. And that's the thing. A lot of games you can just reload or retry or whatever. In this game, you can't. So if you make a choice that you thought was going to go one way and it doesn't, it can be agonizing in a good way, because then it does ultimately, like Glenn said, get you to a point where that run is your run. I want to go back through and play it again, just haven't found the time, but it's awesome.
You have there's a couple of other games that I think have some of the same development team behind them. There's a series, I forget what the series is called now, but you have Man of Medan and Little Hope, and there's another one that's come out quite recently, and the name of that escapes me completely, but they're very similar.
House of Ashes.
That's it, thank you. I've played Man of Medan and I've played half of Little Hope, and they're not as good as Until Dawn, but they are great alternatives if you're looking for something similar.
You're spot on about that. The whole series is called the Dark Pictures Anthology.
That's it.
But you're spot on, Glenn. It's like they provide the same. If you like Until Dawn, they provide the same like structure and those same choices. But it's something is just really special about the kind of campy teen horror that you get in Until Dawn that isn't really replicated as much in those other ones, or at least that's what I would feel. Yeah,
I agree with you. Until Dawn is your typical 80s horror film, isn't it? Slasher film. Mm-hmm. Man of Medan is more like Ghost Ship, if either of you remember that film. And then Little Hope, from what I've played, is kind of more almost like Silent Hill-esque. In terms of like the creepy village where there's fog and you can't seem to escape something, but they don't quite have the magic that Until Dawn had. Agreed. Good pick though, Dave. Nice. That's a great pick.
Cool. Yeah, so I very much enjoyed playing through it with Sophie was a lot of fun. Yeah. Awesome. So Geoffrey, your next game.
Yeah, I'm realizing a lot of my picks, or the ones for mature, or at least these more mature games, are a lot of it based in nostalgia. So I don't know if they'll hold up as well today, but needs no introduction. But Silent Hill 2. Have either of you played Silent Hill 2?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, back in the day on the PlayStation 2. Fantastic game. Really, really good game. Again, such an eerie quality to it. Again, talking about the fog and the town and the mystery. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Have you played it, Dave?
I've never played the series at all, so I look forward to hearing about it.
So Silent Hill, and again, I've played every game, except for there was one on PSP because I had known that. I've played every one. I haven't beat all of them, but Silent Hill is my favorite horror series, period. Just because while I know we'll touch on Resident Evil, I like some of those games. For me, it's more that psychological horror aspect that's not so much about the action. Not that all the Resident Evil were about that, but Silent Hill, specifically Silent Hill 2, for some reason, if you don't know, it's about a character named James Sunderland who comes to, or is summoned essentially to the town of Silent Hill by who he thinks is his deceased wife, Mary. And that's all I'll say, because it's a heavy narrative game that has a ton of endings, but it's hard to put into words. But Silent Hill 2, and Glenn, you might understand this, there's this feeling of dread and oppression that it's unmatched. And I think a lot of it comes down to the music. It's not your typical soundscapes. It's just this kind of off-putting soundscape mixed with the fog and the way you explore. And your character has a radio, and whenever you're getting near to some of these creepier denizens, you start to have this static come through, which just immediately puts you on edge. And I guess the reason I really fondly remember this game is because I was 16. I was having a sleepover with a buddy at the time, and we literally played through the entirety of the game in one night, and we were terrified and eating snacks. And so it was just one of these things that I think it was a nostalgic time capsule. But all of the Silent Hill games for me bring that really just off-putting, creepy vibe. But Silent Hill 2 just tells one of the best stories in gaming, period, in my little opinion.
It's funny, Geoffrey, because for me, what makes Silent Hill so good is that they're almost ghost stories without actually being ghost stories,
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because we talked about Project Zero, Fatal Frame, and how that's quite unique because it has the ghost premise, and that's not done very often. And Silent Hill I would put in that same category, despite the fact it does have your kind of similar tropes to, it doesn't have zombies, but it has monsters and what have you. But there's just something about the atmosphere, as you mentioned, and it almost feels quite suffocating to play. It's got this suffocating atmosphere, the fog as well, as you said. And it does. It reminds me of a ghost tale. Like as I've played further into other games in the series, you play it along, and then you're almost like second guessing. Like, is my character alive? Are they asleep? Are they dead? Is something out? You know what I mean? You never quite know what's going on, and it's a very clever way to make a game.
You hit on the best. I think the best word is suffocating. You're right. It's such a, and I don't know if it's because of the game design, the way it kind of funnels you to get not just the story, but the way the game funnels you certain areas. And you're right. That word probably describes it best, which maybe doesn't sound appealing for a lot of people, but it's. And also, each of the monsters, we all know, most people know of Pyramid Head, but each of the monsters is actually a manifestation of James, the character's guilt, we'll just say. And so just knowing that psychological component, it does kind of, you're right, Glenn, provide that extra level of like closing in on yourself, but maybe that's the point, it's supposed to feel that.
And there was a one on the... oh, sorry, Dave, go on, mate.
So this is the one with the dog. At the end.
The dog ending? Yeah. Yes,
that's the one. The dog ending. Yeah.
Where the dog's controlling, the Shibu Inu's controlling the whole thing.
That's my knowledge of Silent Hill.
It's something.
I was just going to say there's one on the Wii, and I think it was on the PlayStation 2 as well, called Shattered Memories?
Shattered Memories, yeah. I remember you showing me that, actually.
Yeah, and it's different because you can't fight back. You have to run, which is, these days actually not that unusual in horror games. As Outlast we mentioned earlier. But back then it was quite unusual, really. And that one had, like, you spoke to a psychiatrist at the start, didn't you? And the way that you, the things that you did in the game would change your character. So, for example, there's a part where you're in a house with this lady, as far as I can remember, and she's getting changed, and you can peek. And as far as I can remember, there's no consequence in game for it. I can't remember very well, but it affects your character and the way that people perceive your character and the way the psychiatrist perceives you as the game goes on. It's just so clever, just such a clever series.
Nice.
It is, and it's kind of there hasn't obviously been a new one. PT was supposed to turn into Hideo Kojima's Silent Hills, but I think the last one was Silent Hill Downpour, something like that. Yeah. That one and Homecoming were fine. They had a similar feel, but the first core 4 games up until Silent Hill 4: The Room. If anyone's listening and hasn't played those games, the first 4, which you have to pretty much get retro versions, those are the ones to play for sure. Anyway, I've harped on too long about it. Sorry.
Okay, so the next game, Glen's other mature game, which is the other one I wanted to say about. I'll let Glen do it, but I'll join you with you.
Yeah, that's all right. When you asked for my picks, I fully expected mine to be your Silent Hills and those kind of older games. But there is something about this one that really grabbed me, and the game is Zombie U for the Wii U. And again, it goes back to that idea of having a unique hook, and I love that, as I said, in horror games. And it was, the fact it's set in London, in England, in London, being from London myself, that always wins me over in a game. And the premise of kind of being called out by someone over a speaker and getting here quick and being told a whole bunch of information there. Here's a pack of stuff. You listen to me and you'll survive. Gets you right into it straight away. Do you know what I mean? What really did it for me was the first time that you had to get something out of your backpack and you had to go to the gamepad, the Wii U gamepad.
Yes.
And on the screen you could still see your character in the third person, but obviously on the pad you were looking at your inventory. And I remember seeing the trailer for it, and I don't think I had a Wii U at the time. I didn't. And I thought, that looks interesting, but it's not until you play it you realise just what a clever concept it is, because as you're looking through the stuff and trying to get out your bag what it is you need, you could be attacked, and you can see the creatures, the zombies, closing in on you. So there's parts like where you're trying to put a code in on a keypad, and again on the game pad you've got the keypad. But on the screen you can see that something's coming up behind you, and it's just really terrifying. It's it's that sense of dread is very well done again.
To be honest, whenever I sort of think about this game, I just think kind of like what a shame that it didn't take off as much as it deserved to. And part of that was because obviously the Wii U didn't do well, but it kind of got because it was before the Wii U came out, like 3 months before the Wii U came out, because it was a launch game. I went to Eurogamer in London, and there was like the Wii U section was there, and I queued an hour to get in there, and they had like, you know, the Mario game and Rayman and Nintendo Land were all there in this one area. You could just go between them. But for Zombie U, there was a separate line which was another hour, because that game was just the most popular one by far. And I remember queuing an hour to play a demo of Zombie U. And the guy sort of taught me how the gamepad worked and how it all controls all that. First thing I did was because the first thing I do in games is I always look to see what's behind me in case I miss something, even though it's just a demo I'm playing for 10 minutes. And there was a door there, and I opened it, and that crashed the demo.
Oh no.
Oh no, the scariest thing of all.
Yeah. But he let me have another go. But what I liked is if your character died, they died. And then you played as another character who, for some reason, had to pick up the objective for where your other character was, and they seem to have knowledge of everything that's already happened in the story. But you started with nothing, but if you went back to where you died, you found your previous character there, and if you killed them, you got all your stuff back from them. But if you died on the way, you lose that all forever, which was a really, really good concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what built the tension, the fact that you knew if you died, you were gone. And I know it was a first-person game, and you couldn't build a huge amount of a connection with your character, but even so, you still did. Do you know what I mean? You still wanted that person, whoever you were at that time, to live. There was one bit in this game, Dave. Again, it's difficult sometimes to talk. You don't want to spoil stuff, but there was one part of this game which almost cost it its place on this list for me because it was so annoying, and it kind of threw everything back in your face that you try to do through the rest of the game. Do we want to do spoilers, or shall I leave it, or what?
I haven't actually beaten this game, so don't tell me the butler did it.
No, it wasn't the butler. That wasn't the butler. What I'll say, I won't spoil it then, but what I'll say is the whole point of, like we were saying, you know, of trying to survive and having one character the whole time, there's a bit quite late on into the game where it almost feels impossible to survive, and you almost have to just keep going through a good few characters because you'll die so many times. And that annoyed me because I'd built up this like repertoire with this character, and I'd been alive for a good few hours with this character, and it felt like that bit just spoilt it a bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, someone listening maybe might know the bit I'm talking about, and you know, they might agree with me on that front, but I won't spoil it.
There's this one bit in it where, because you always start off in the base, don't you, with the new character. There was this one bit I got up to where you were captured and then you were like in a cage.
That's the bit I'm talking about, Dave.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then
that's the bit I'm talking about,
because if you died there, your next character woke up in that cage.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's the bit, Yeah,
but that bit is so incredibly difficult, and I've died so many times.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just me. I mean, I'm pretty sure that most people would die a lot. The whole point, like I say, of trying to stay alive and building this relationship with your character was almost pointless because you just died. It's like, I don't. It's not worth getting attached to this person because I'm going to die another 10 times on this bit, you know?
Yeah. But another reason I'd say that this game was a shame as well was because the reviews for it weren't the best. They weren't bad, but they sort of seemed to be. Some people thought it was good. Some other people thought it was crap. There was a lot of obviously negativity about it. The game, and it's a shame because they could have. Because it was Ubisoft that did it, but some games they did, like the first Assassin's Creed, was good but not great. But then they made a sequel where they just improved on everything, and Assassin's Creed became a monster franchise. Yeah, and it's a shame that this game didn't get a sequel where they could improve on what needed improving. But it did get a port onto was it PS4 I played it on?
It was on the PS4,
and it was just called Zombie. So I don't know. I'm assuming it didn't do well on there as well because we've not seen a sequel.
Well, I don't see how it could have had the same impact because it didn't have that mechanic of the gamepad. Do you know what I mean?
True. Yeah, I did play it. It's definitely inferior on the PS4, I thought.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the port thing because when I saw that, Glenn, you were going to be talking about this game, I was really excited because I wanted to hear more about this in detail from someone that's played it because it was a game that I actually really thought about heavily buying a Wii U for because I love horror, but obviously didn't. But then when they ported it to Xbox, knowing that it wouldn't have or PlayStation, knowing they didn't have like the whole the gamepad type thing, I picked it up on a sale for really cheap, and the gameplay itself was cool for a little bit. It felt like a sort of like a roguelike game, but knowing that gamepad wasn't there for those innovations they started, it just kind of felt like a derivative zombie game. So it sounds like the Wii U gamepad really is what set it apart. Potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, exactly right. Because, I mean, there's a game, just as an example, there's a game called Welcome to Handwell. I don't know if you've heard of this one.
Yes, I have that game. I don't like that game.
No, I was going to say it's okay. I mean, it's nothing fantastic. But again, it's set in London, or and it's very similar in some respects. And Zombie U could have been that game. There's not a lot difference. One's more polished, but there's not a lot of difference between them. True. But that gamepad mechanic is what, for me, elevated that game up to a whole new level.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. Nice.
And I like that you had a cricket bat as your weapon as well, because England,
yeah, quite possibly, yeah.
If this was set in New York, it would be a baseball bat instead, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Or a slice of pizza, one of the two. All right, what do you got, Dave? Let's hear what yours is.
What have I got? So my other one, actually, I did like this one, obviously. It's called Dead Space, and I played it on the Xbox 360. Now, this was what do you call it? Sci-fi horror, would you say?
Yes. Yeah.
But it's sort of one thing that struck me with this, because my friend recommended this to me back in the day, because he said that he played it and just 10 minutes in there was this moment that made him go, oh my god, like that, and that never happened for me, so I don't know what he was talking about. But this sort of reminded me of sort of like Resident Evil 4 sort of thing, like the over-the-shoulder camera, like sort of survival horror thing, and you're on a space station. But the main thing I sort of noticed about this is there's like no UI in this game. Like your health is represented by this meter you've got on the back of your suit, and like you can see like your ammo sort of on the gun itself and things like that. So it's one of them where I noticed games in general was trying to make the UI smaller or less intrusive on the gameplay to try and make it seem like it's real life, and I think this is the furthest the game's gone for that, of what I've played as well. So the enemies you've got in this are called Necromorphs. So the Necromorphs, they were like these alien sort of things, but they cause usually you go for headshots in games, but I think in this one you have to go for their limbs.
Yeah, that's right. As
their weak points, which was a very interesting idea. So it's very satisfying as well to sort of blow their limbs off like that. And also there was a Wii, because we didn't mention with Dead Rising, there was a Wii version of that was sort of like a watered down version, but the Wii version of Dead Space was completely different. It was a on-rail shooter, which I think you had as well, Glenn.
Yeah, that is one of those games I mentioned earlier that I return to quite often.
Yeah, I remember playing through that. It was pretty good, that one.
It was,
but yeah,
good.
on this one,
good.
Yeah, on this one, it sort of had that whole, you explored the space station, you had to sort of solve puzzles to get through certain areas, and, I mean, do you know the ending of this game?
No.
Okay,
this was one of the games that, sorry Dave to interrupt you, but I want to know if you can relate to this, right? This was one of the games for me where I used to check, because I played this on the Xbox 360, and did you ever used to check what sort of achievements games had and see if they were doable and stuff? And there was like an achievement. I can't. Go on.
This was probably the first. It was quite early into me having an Xbox. I think this was the first game where I was like, I'm not going to bother trying for them.
Yeah, well, you did the right thing, because there were some like you got the achievement if you did the whole game only using a certain weapon or doing this or doing that. And I started this game, and I just got so overwhelmed to not knowing how to try and do it and get the achievements that I stopped playing it. It's such a ridiculous reason to stop playing a game.
Yeah. But yeah, have you played it, Geoffrey?
Yeah, Dead Space, specifically Dead Space 1 and 2 are also two of my favorite horror games. Dead Space 3 is not good because they went more of an action route, but the first two, specifically the first, yeah, it's the level of like atmosphere, and there's so many twists and turns that, again, I won't spoil them, but there's so many twists and turns that you're just like, wow, would not have seen that coming. And then just the body horror with the necromorphs and the way you have to get rid of them. It's such a clever game, and there's so many good scares. And they're remastering the first one, or kind of redoing it, but you almost don't. I mean, it's good they are, but you almost don't need to, because even playing the first one, which is I think 12 or 13 years old now, came out I think in 2008, still holds up today, which is pretty remarkable.
It's on Game Pass. I keep mentioning Game. I'm not sponsored, by the way.
No, you're just getting your money's worth, aren't you?
Yeah.
But
they are good though.
So yeah, so I won't say it, but do you remember how it ended, Geoffrey, the first game? Because I remember that very well.
Yes, without spoiling anything. Yes, I can't really say anything. Never mind. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Just, my God, that bloody butler, just, my goodness.
Yeah, that butler just scares the crap out of you.
Jumping up, yeah.
Glenn, you need to go back and finish them, man. They're such, the first two are so good. You need to finish those games.
Yeah, I will return to them. I won't watch any. I'll play it properly, but I'm not bothered about achievements anymore. I'm over that, so I can play it properly this time.
Okay. So we've been well over an hour now. Are you all right to carry on, Geoffrey, or do you need to?
Nope, all good. I figured things out, so we're all good. Keep going.
Cool. Right. So next we're going to do. We've gone through all of our favourites, but I've left two particular series out because these two are my probably favourite series in the horror genre. Those being Castlevania and Resident Evil. So I thought I'd dedicate more time for them and have sort of this as the main event of this. So we go through Castlevania first. And although this is sort of like half of the Metroidvania name, I'm not actually familiar with the Metroidvania games in this series. I'm only familiar with the earlier ones. So what are your knowledges on Castlevania?
The main game I've played in the Castlevania series is Castlevania 4, Super Castlevania 4, on the Super Nintendo. I've played 1 at the NES original. I've played a bit of 3. I haven't ever played Simon's Quest, and it's because I've heard it's so different. It's a game that I do want to play, but I just want to give it a chance. I want to sit down and give it some time, But 4 I've finished 4. It's an absolutely fantastic game. I have played Symphony of the Night to an extent. I've never finished it, but I prefer the linear platform ones to the Metroidvania ones. I've also played one of the DS ones, and I can't think which one it is now. And I've also played the one on the 3DS, which I think was it called like Mirror of Fate or something?
Yep.
That was a great game. I don't know how that was received or whether people generally like it, but I really enjoyed it. It was a bit different. But I really enjoyed that one.
I think that might have been the last one.
Oh, really?
Because you don't see many Castlevanias since. Because obviously they've done the collections, haven't they? But
yeah.
Outside of that.
My knowledge set on Castlevania is Castlevania is my favorite game series of all time. Period. So I've played every Castlevania game, not to completion, but I've played all of them, so I'm familiar with all of them, the lore and the story, because I love the series. Period. But in terms of knowledge base, the ones that I'm actually, which I know a lot of people probably won't be proud of this, but the ones I'm actually the biggest fan of are like the PlayStation 2 iteration. So Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness are the 3D ones, and I know that's not the high bar, but for me those were my favorite, as well as Lords of Shadow, which was on the 360 and PS3. I think it was the precursor to the one you were saying, Glenn, Mirror of Fate. But So those newer ones I have more knowledge base on because I finished all those. But I will say Symphony of the Night, I always heard for 10, 15 years how great it was, but I only finished that game in this last year, and I have to echo that. It's absolutely incredible. I needed a guide. I'm just going to say that. I'm not good enough to get through it. I needed to use a guide, but fantastic series just in general.
You're not a real gamer.
I mean, I don't care. I'm a middle 30-year-old person. I don't really care. So
exactly right. Yeah, fair play.
So for me, I've got a more controversial take on Castlevania. Although I do think Super Castlevania 4 is my favourite. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But talking nostalgically, my favourite was probably Castlevania 64, which is the one
I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Now, that was the first Castlevania game I ever played or heard of. I've actually got it on the shelf next to me now, and I'm looking at it fondly. Because that was like the first, I think it was the first 3D one they did. And I know mechanically it's not great, but when you're young and you're playing games that aren't necessarily great, you don't care, because it's a game. You don't get them very often. And and honestly, I did find this scary. Not as scary as Zelda, but scary still. And it was weird because obviously a lot of the cutscene stuff had text, but there was this one, the Dracula, well, who you're meant to think is Dracula, but it turns out it's not Dracula at the end, spoilers. There is actual voice acting for this character, which was a bit strange, but you also had 2 playable characters, and the female one, Carrie, could shoot energy balls out as well. And there was like skeletons on motorbikes and things like that, I remember. And I just genuinely really like this game, and I acknowledge its flaws. Like there's this one level, just to give you this horror feeling, like you go into this room and there's this huge sort of arena style you're in, and there's this giant dead bull there in the middle, and I was exploring this room not knowing what to do, but I was absolutely on edge the whole time, because I know that dead bull, that's going to wake up and attack me at some point. And it does. But it does it in the cutscene anyway, it wakes up. So it was, but I just thought during gameplay that's suddenly going to get up, so I was making sure the camera was pointing towards it at all times when I was exploring it. So little things like that. But so that was the only Castlevania game I played as a child or teenager. But Castlevanias 1, 3 and 4 are the main ones I've played other than that, and I was in my 20s for those. But Super Castlevania 4 I beat earlier this year on a live stream, and honestly that game I just think is near perfection, honestly. Just the way it controls is flawless, very hard, but still just, it's one where you learn it, like the old Mega Man games, you learn it. And then the levels that you might spend like an hour on the same level, but by the end of that hour you can get through it.
I mean, Dave, you've beat Cuphead. You can beat anything, right?
Oh yeah, I've never mentioned that, have I?
You haven't, no.
Yeah, I still haven't beaten Castlevania 1 though. I'm determined. That I have a real soft spot for that game for some reason. I've no nostalgia for it. I just have a real soft spot for it. So yeah, so let's go on to the main event, shall we? So Resident Evil, that's a little known franchise, but I am fond of it. So what was your first introduction to this series? I know, Glenn, you already mentioned this, but reiterate.
Yeah, so the first, I knew of it, but I never had a PlayStation, and not many of my mates did. We all had Nintendo 64s. I think I had one friend that had a PlayStation. So I knew of it, but I hadn't played it. And then obviously the second one was put on the Nintendo 64, and I bought it, and I mentioned that first kind of hour with it, but I absolutely loved it. Like, it quickly became one of my favourite games of all time. And then I played a host of others. Finally managed to play the first one, played 3, Nemesis, Code Veronica, and then I kind of drifted away from gaming a little bit as you get older, And I bought a GameCube for the Resident Evil remake. The GameCube I bought and still have to this day was the Resident Evil GameCube. It's a black GameCube, nice. And you got the game with it. And the remake just blew me away. Like, I couldn't believe how good it looked, and I still think it looks very good to this day. And then I played Zero. Obviously, Zero came out for the GameCube. And then again, I kind of drifted away from gaming before 4 came out. So I didn't play 4 until a good few years later. And I think, Dave, I might have been at university with you when I played it.
Yeah, on the Wii you played it.
On the Wii, yeah, exactly right. I played it on the Wii. And now, I don't know. I mean, this is probably an unpopular opinion. Don't get me wrong. I do very much enjoy 4. But I do lament the fact that it meant a step away from that classic use of fixed camera angles and item management and limited saves. So as much as I do like 4, the fact that it heralded this kind of new era for Resident Evil was quite sad for me, you know?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of fond memories of the original games. It just, I don't know, the Resident Evil didn't stick out to me like Silent Hill did. But I think like you, Glenn, I remember playing the N64 Resident Evil 2. I think liking it fine, but I'll be honest, up in like 1 through 0 and all those ones, which I know doesn't make sense number-wise, but playing those original games, I don't really have any memories of, to be honest. So it wasn't really until Resident Evil 4 that I guess had it more on the radar. I remember buying it when I had like a part-time job and started college and was in a dorm room and on my 20-inch tube TV, for anyone that remembers those, ask your parents. And yeah, I just remember playing 4, really, really liking it, but it didn't sweep me off my feet. It wasn't anything like, oh my gosh, my favorite thing ever. It was a cool game. I liked the set piece moments. So 4 was kind of, I guess, more of my introduction, which I know isn't, the best thing to say because everyone loves the original ones more or can love the original ones more. I did play through 5 later in life. That was fine. 6 was fine, but Resident Evil as a series just hasn't hooked me like Silent Hill did. So it's really only 4 and the most recent one, Village, that are the ones I can only really speak a lot on, I guess.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so for me, Resident Evil 2 on the N64 was the first time I'd heard of the series. I knew there must have been a first game, but again, I have the box for Resident Evil 2 still, but Mario Party's inside it, so I don't know where the game is. I don't even know where the Mario Party box is, so it's got Resident Evil 2 in it, I imagine. But but yeah, I could. It's one that I couldn't really get into it at the time because of the fixed camera angles. Sort of threw me off too much. But then I played Code Veronica when we borrowed a Dreamcast of someone, and again, it was the same story. So I sort of ignored the series after that. And when Resident Evil 4 came out, and it got like it was sort of critically acclaimed, wasn't it? And I watched the DVD of it that came with a magazine, and I thought, this looks actually really good, so I gave it a go, and that's where I fell in love with it. And then, because all the previous Resident Evil games got released on the GameCube, and so I actually, that's how I played through all the classic Resident Evils, and actually got used to the camera angles, and actually managed to enjoy that part of Resident Evil now. So that's sort of how I got into the franchise that way. So the GameCube remake of the first game is how I played the first game. I never played the original. But I did play Deadly Silence, which was on the DS, which was like a port of the first one. But they added it, you could play 2 different modes of it. Like one which I think was just an exact copy of the PlayStation original, and the other mode added in some touchscreen stuff.
Yeah, no, I've played that one as well. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, the you could like slash at them and it with the stylus, and it was like a knife or something, wasn't it? It went to like first person mode.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was like, but I think what people remember the first game for was the brilliant writing.
Brilliant in quotes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Gonna become a chilled sandwich.
Yeah. Who doesn't use that phrase, Jill Sandwich?
What was the other one? The Master of Unlocking, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The Master of Unlocking.
And obviously we'll talk more about it soon, but Resident Evil 7, that was one of the trophy names when you get the lockpick.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I remember, I think one key moment in the first one as well, which again, I first saw this in the GameCube remake, is when you first come across a zombie, and there's that ultra sort of realistic cutscene of the zombie turning his head towards you.
Yeah.
That was just amazing. But the one thing about as well was, do you remember the giant spiders?
Oh,
in the first game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
There's a bit, because I played it in the GameCube remake, and you go in the room and the camera angle changes to show it on the wall there, or see it, and it looks so realistic. It absolutely creeped me out. And when I played Deadly Silence, when I got to that bit and I was like, oh my god, this is where that giant spider is, and then it just looked like a PS1 spider, and I was like,
a polygonal blocky spider.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. So anything else to add about the first game?
I'll tell you, I mean, in a similar way to what you just said about the spider, sharks are the thing that does it for me. And there's a part with the sharks, isn't there? Is it Neptune, I think it's called? And you had to walk through the water, and it's like you blatantly know something's going to happen. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't want to go through it. Like, I don't want to. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to stay here and wait for help. And obviously, none comes, and eventually you got to do it. But I didn't enjoy that bit. I really sharks fascinate me, but they terrify me in equal measure. And that part of the game, I could have done without that, to be honest.
That's fair.
So the second one comes out, introduces us to Leon and Claire. So this got a remake as well a few years ago on PS4. I played it, so we can talk about both versions if you like. But I do remember playing it on the N64, and because Leon's like first day on the job cop, isn't he, when this zombie outbreak happens, and you're in the police station, and you got all the other police are all zombies and stuff, and my brother said, that's a good first impression, isn't it? First day on the job and you're murdering your colleagues.
Yeah, exactly. Not a good way to get a promotion, I guess.
No.
I remember the very first screen, Dave, of Resi 2 on the N64, because I can't remember another game I'd ever played up to that point with fixed camera angles, like you said. And I think you have the cutscene where the oil tanker blows up or something, and you get separated, didn't you, or something like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the very first screen, you got fire all around the sides, and then you got zombies walking towards you, I think. And I must have died 3 or 4 times. Like the start of the game, I've been playing the games for a few years by this point, walking into the fire because I couldn't work out the tank controls. Like I just constantly kept walking into the fire and dying. It's like, this is ridiculous. This is the worst game ever. And then worked it out. And then obviously, but oh my god, that first screen was almost enough to put me off the series for life,
Wow.
Crazy.
My goodness.
And talking of the remake, a funny story for you. When the remake came out, it was, as much as I love the series, these days I don't buy games at full price, so I was waiting for it to drop, and thankfully on the PS4 games drop in price very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So I picked it up when it was like whatever, 20 quid, I don't know. And my missus said to me, I wouldn't mind playing that. And it was the end of the year, so I said to her, all right, well, this will be our New Year's Eve game then. I won't play it, and I really did want to play it, so we're waiting. It's a couple of months or a month, whatever it was. And she was pregnant at the time with our son, with our second child. Anyway, so we get to New Year's Eve and we're like, right, let's play Resident Evil 2. And you start off and you go into the petrol station, didn't you? At the start of the remake. We're talking 10 minutes into the game, and her water's broke, and we had to go to the hospital, and our son was born, so we didn't actually end up playing it for another couple of months after that.
Wow.
So
I remember saying to you at the time, was the game that scary?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, but that was my residing memory of that game. Yeah, just as I was about to, I just sat down. I've been waiting months to play this game. Effectively, been waiting years to play it, And then my son decided to come along that night, and that was that.
Yeah, because when I played this, I didn't really have many memories of the original other than the setting. So there's sort of some cutscenes. I thought there's a bit where you have quite early on. There's that cop who's sort of like trapped under a door or something, but then when you sort of pull him out, it's like his legs are gone and stuff like that. And also it was stuff like that in the original. Oh
yeah, I don't remember that being in the original. I mean, it's been a long time since I played it, but I don't remember that. Even to a lesser extent, I don't remember that bit.
No. But okay, so we can't talk about Resident Evil 2 without talking about Mr. X. So earlier on, I mentioned like the scariest game moments, and I said I was going to save my other one for when we get to Resident Evil. Now, Mr. X is like this. I don't know what it's meant to be, but it chases you throughout the whole game pretty much.
Yeah, he's he's a tyrant, isn't he? He's like a form of a tyrant or something. Yeah. Yeah,
and the bit that got me, because I knew it was obviously like the feeling of being chased always gets me, and you hear his footsteps as well, and he just kills you when he gets to you. Because when I first encountered him, I just laid all my ammo into him before realising I can't kill him.
Yeah.
But the thing that got me was the lobby area in the police station. That was the safe zone. If you're in there, you're safe.
Yeah.
So I was making my way to the next area. I go through the side door, I climbed a ladder, then I went along this balcony area above the lobby, and then I hear the footsteps, and I look down, and Mr. X has come in the door and just marched through the lobby with intent, and then gone through the other door where I was, and that terrified me to know that he was. And I'm guessing that's sort of set up, that he always does that when you get to that point. But it's just,
yes,
he was in the safe area. He shouldn't be allowed to go in there. And that even though I wasn't down there at the time, just knowing that he could be in that area,
he could do it. Yeah.
There's no safe zone now. That absolutely terrified me.
Yeah, because back in the day, the only character up until that point, or around that time rather, was that could do that was Nemesis. He could follow you from screen to screen, but I don't think Mr. X in the original game, in the second game, could do that. See, I really do wish you could remember things clearly, because I might be wrong here, but I seem to remember that Mr. X was only in one part of the story. You know, like you played through with Leon, then you played through with Claire. I think Mr. X was only in one of them, so I played it through as Leon first, I think, and he wasn't even in the game, and it's only when you played as Claire that he turned up. So when I played as Claire, I was expecting the same story again, effectively, but I just wanted to do it because it was fun. And then he turned up. I was like, who on earth is this person? Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't expecting it at all. But in the remake, that's not the case, is it? He's just in it in both versions, isn't he, from the start? Yeah,
because when you... I don't know if this was the case in the original, but when you beat it with Leon, you can sort of do sort of like a new game plus with Claire, and it's sort of like... It was that like that in the original?
Yeah, so there was like a certain point where it would say to you there was a weapon in a locker and you could take it if you wanted, but if you left it behind, and when you played later as Claire, it would still be there.
Okay. Because I started Claire's one after Leon, and I couldn't get far, honestly.
In the remake?
Yeah.
Yeah, her section seems a bit tougher, actually. You start off in a different area, don't you? And it's a bit of a gauntlet just to run through, just to get to the station and stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, I beat it as Leon, but I didn't get far as Claire. How about you, Geoffrey?
Well, good timing. So, unfortunately, I do have to head out of this talk. As much as I can talk about some of the later games, our food is going to be here, and I need to get ready for that. So, I apologize for having to cut short, but I do have to head out now.
Cheers, right. Geoffrey. Nice speaking to you, mate.
You too.
Yeah. So, everyone go check out Geoffrey at Indie Gaming Guild. Link is in the top pinned comment. Cool.
Yeah,
bye,
thank you so much, Dave. Thanks for having me be a part of this. It was really fun talking with you, Dave and Glenn, having to catch up on all of our favorite horror stuff. So I really appreciate it. It'll be fun to watch this later. So thank you guys so much.
Cool.
Yeah, it's up, man. Brilliant. Cheers, mate.
All right, take care now. Bye-bye.
Cool. So should we move on to Resident Evil 3?
Yeah, so 3, I didn't play much of 3 in the day. Back in the day, I played a bit of it. A friend had it. He had a PlayStation. But I've played, obviously, the remake since... I tell a lie, sorry. I then played it myself on the GameCube. You said yourself, didn't you, that they got released on the GameCube after?
Yeah.
And I completed it. Yeah, I completed it on there. And I also own it on the PS... Is it on the PS Vita? I downloaded it on the PS Vita. Yeah, I'm sure it's on there. But then I played the remake more recently. I like the idea about Nemesis being in between the first two games. You know, like more than the actual game itself. As much as I do like the game, I liked that idea more. I just thought it was a really clever way of doing it. Jill, you're back to playing as Jill, and it's Carlos, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
I don't have a huge amount, like in terms of memories of the third one. Like, I remember playing it, I remember finishing it, but it didn't stick with me as much as 2. And the remake of 3, I don't enjoy as much as the remake of 2 either. And that's nothing to do with nostalgia. I just don't think it's as good a game. I don't know about you.
I've not played the remake.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I just remember... all I remember is Nemesis just popping up and saying stars all the time.
Yeah, and you had like choices, didn't you? It would say like, do you want to run to the police station or fight back or something? And, you know, you could choose what you were going to do. But My biggest issue with the remake really is how often Nemesis turns up, how often you fight him. It dilutes him a bit. He's not as scary anymore. As big and bulking as he is, and as hard as he is to fight, he just becomes a bit annoying, and he shouldn't have been that. Do you know what I mean? They took away that fear because he's used too much. And I said it earlier about Alien Isolation, and it happens too often in horror games. It is the Achilles heel of horror games, is overusing your antagonist, you know?
It kind of happens in sort of horror films as well, when a villain becomes marketable, like say Freddy Krueger.
Freddy Krueger's exactly right. Yeah.
It's one I've been looking to play one day, Resident Evil 3 Remake, but I've heard from people because it's very short, which again appeals to me. But
don't get me wrong, it's worth playing. It just could have been better, in my opinion. Is all.
Yeah. So next one, Code Veronica. So I first played it on the Dreamcast, but then eventually got it on GameCube. Although I don't have my GameCube copy anymore for some reason. Don't know where that is, but oh well. So is this one you're playing as Claire?
You play as Claire and the boy. What's his name?
Do you know? I used the walkthrough for an online walkthrough for this game, and they just kept on referring to him as Titanic Boy.
They?
Because he kind of looks like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah. I can't remember his. Oh, Steve. Is his name Steve? Is it Steve? I can't remember. I don't know. Let's call him Leonardo DiCaprio then.
So I'm just looking up now.
Steve. It's Steve. Steve Burnside, or is that a different character?
I can't find it yet.
I don't know. I can't remember. That name's just crept into my head. But so Code Veronica I played on the PS2. I bought it for the PS2, and my biggest memory of this game was that there's a fight on an aeroplane against a big creature at some point, and I remember beating it. It took ages. It was really annoying, this fight, and it took ages, and I finally beat it, expecting that to be the final boss, and then you turn up and you're halfway through the game. It was like insert disc 2 or something, or
Really?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, you're having a laugh in here. I thought it was finished, but you're only halfway through.
Yeah, I remember being like in this, because I think this is also in one of the Chronicles, the light gun games, where you activate a projector and it shows like this brother and sister doing...
Yeah, Alfred and something, the twins. The Ashfords is their surname,
That's it, yeah. His name is Steve Burnside, by the way.
There we go, it kind of popped into my head, yeah.
Yeah. But I also remember there was this one creature I found quite creepy where I think you look down a pit or something and it's lying there. It's got like sticks for eyes or something. Like it's got no eyes, but it's got sticks for them. I might be remembering that wrong.
I don't remember that.
It's like, they do a lot of weird designs, but you see so many over the series, and I haven't played this game in like 15 years since I played this one. So
I remember that my biggest memories of Code Veronica, apart from what I've just said, is I remember you turn up at a mansion, and I remember thinking it very much looks like the Spencer Mansion from the first game.
Yes, they've done a bit where it's on purposely the same design.
Oh, okay. And then you fight, or you don't fight him, but the Alfred character we just mentioned shoots at you. He's shooting at you.
I remember that.
I don't remember huge amounts of Code Veronica. I think for me, 2 was so good that the games after that, whilst, don't get me wrong, very good in their own right, there was something about 2. So, that idea of the perfect storm, like the setting of the police station, the 2 iconic characters as they came to being together in the same game. 2 for me just got everything so right that the ones after, whilst I still enjoyed them at the time, I don't remember them as well,
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah. Okay, so what's your thoughts on Resident Evil 0?
0, I was really looking forward to when it was announced because of the remake that had come out for the GameCube, and I really enjoyed it, but I didn't like the item box decision they made, or the lack of an item box. You dropped things on the floor instead, if you remember.
Yeah.
So at the time I kind of liked it because it was annoying when you had to find an item box, and it was a good idea that you could put things down and not just lose them, which was the case in the earlier games. But it still led to backtracking. So it kind of somewhere between the two systems would have been best, but obviously that's not what happened, And I replayed it recently on the Switch, Zero, and found it much more annoying than I remember finding it on the GameCube. So again, I enjoyed it. It was fine, but much more annoying than I found it back then. For whatever reason, mainly down to that item box or lack of it.
This is the only fixed camera Resident Evil game that I've not beaten. Because I remember you start out on the train, don't you?
Yeah, you do, yeah.
And I remember there's that sort of monster, whatever it is, that sort of singing or something that has that weird eerie noise it's making.
Yeah.
And that creeped me out as well. But then you're playing as Rebecca. Is she in the first game?
She is in the first game, yeah. She's in Chris's part of the game. And you're playing as two characters at once, aren't you? Yeah, you can zap between them, can't you? You can change between them.
Yeah, I think that might have been what I didn't enjoy.
Yeah, it was a bit tedious at times. Again, see, that and the item box, the good ideas, but they just weren't implemented well enough. And to do both of them in one game was quite bold, because it was quite a change, and they kind of got both of them slightly wrong, which hampered the game,
Yeah. Because I suppose if there's like a mechanic that you don't take to when it comes out, and in 15 years time, that's gonna feel worse, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and to do two of them in one game.
Yeah, sometimes good game mechanics age, don't they, and don't seem good in the future. So something you don't take to back then will just be worse, won't it?
Frustrate you even more. Yeah, exactly.
So Resident Evil 4, like I said, this is my favourite game in the series. It's the one that got me into the franchise, and I actually will put this on my top 10 favourite games of all time. I'll be as bold as that. Obviously, I don't play a lot of survival horror. I do prefer the more action focus on it. And although this did have sort of more restricting elements, interestingly though, because I played it on the GameCube where it came on 2 discs, and I have it on the Wii as well, and I have it on the Switch. So I remember playing this with showing it to my friend as well, and we spent the whole sort of weekend on it. We didn't beat it or anything, but he ended up buying a copy as well, and it's one of these games where you sort of we played bits together and we played bits separately, but we always sort of came together to compare stories of it.
Yeah.
And when you have sort of that experience of a game with someone, it sort of makes it a bit magical in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know what you mean.
You create in-jokes about a game as well, because they're not zombies in this, are they? I don't even know what they're meant to be.
They're Los Plagos or something, aren't they? They're like infected with a parasite or something.
Yeah. They're like zombies that aren't zombies or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Parasites there. But I don't know what language they're speaking. But
in the game it just says Europe, doesn't it? But I think it's meant to be Spain or somewhere like that.
Yeah, it's like they're speaking Spanish, but there's a lot of things that they shout, you hear, and the most common one we hear sounds like that he's shouting, "I got a riddle." It sounds like he's shouting. And we're waiting to, and so we sort of did a thing where every time we heard that, one of us would have to tell the other a riddle. And it was mostly from Batman.
Batman, yeah, I knew you were going to say that, yeah.
And but I played it a few years ago or might have been last year on the Switch again. I still really enjoyed it.
I like 4. I enjoy 4. I said that obviously I bought the GameCube for the remake, and I used to buy a game in magazines back then, as lots of people did, and I remember the screenshots of 4. It was going to be a very different game at one point. It was like Ghosts instead, wasn't it? It was like Ghost house. Yeah, it was like the early concept for it was like a ghost house or there was a big ghost with like a hook for a hand or something like that. And I remember seeing these screenshots and thinking, oh, you know, that's different. They're taking that in a different direction. And then just drifting away, like I said, kind of drifted out of gaming. So it wasn't until years, like I'd kind of forgotten Resident Evil 4 was even a thing, and then played it. And I was like, oh wow, this is very different to what I thought it was going to be, because I still expected it to be that, you know. So yeah, and then obviously you start off in the, as I said, in Europe somewhere, and you're in the car with the local police, and they're escorting you around, and then you see that man being burnt at the stake or something, don't you? In a village.
Yeah, and then one thing as well, because it gives you the binoculars at that point to scout. So, and then my friend was pointing out how eerie that was. You got this burning corpse in the middle, but all the villagers are just carrying on with their day while that's happening. Yeah. It's like, what an atmosphere that was.
Yeah, and because I didn't really know anything about 4, I was expecting, if not the same fixed camera, I was expecting at least the same kind of survival horror. So obviously you're thrown into that bit, the whole village attacks you, and you've got to just fight them off, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you're going up the ladders and jumping out of windows and whatnot. And I was like, bloody hell, this is intense. I wasn't expecting this, you know. And then obviously that carries on into the later games as well.
Yeah. This one was a bit more generous with ammo than previous ones.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And also this one had shops as well, or merchants, and I think he's the most quotable character in this.
Yeah, the what are you buying?
Yeah, it's nearly midnight, so I won't do my impression of him. But people know who I mean. But do you know you can kill that merchant and he just turns up again at the next stop?
I did hear that. Yeah, I did hear. I never tried it, but I'm surprised he's never made a way back in any of the other games. No,
he's so iconic for the memes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But another thing about it was, at one point you get a rocket launcher which you only can use once.
Yeah.
And I always like to save something like that, but when you do the castle and you have the boss from there, it's like the short guy that becomes that big plant thing.
Yeah.
I died so many times on that, and I thought, I'm going to try and weaken it with my rocket launcher, and it's one hit kill.
Yeah, I did the exact same thing.
Yeah, because I remember I said to you, there's a boss, save it for a certain boss, and you sent me a text saying, the little guy that turns into a plant, is it? You said,
oh, is that what happened?
And I said yes, and then I said yes, and then you texted me back saying, okay, bring the noise. That's exactly what you text to me.
How do you remember this stuff, man?
I don't know why, I can't remember anything from Resident Evil 3 or Code Veronica, but I remember that.
Yeah, I did. I just popped him, shot him in the head with that, and that was it.
Yeah.
On you go, next one.
Another thing you do as well is if you replay the game after beating it, the merchant will sell you an infinite launcher for stupid money. You have to spend ages grinding for that money, but man, you can just one-shot everything in that game from then. It just breaks it completely.
Yeah, I remember doing, not so much with 4, but with 5, maxing out everything like that and just causing havoc through the game. And
the last thing I'll point out this game introduced was the Mercenaries mode, which is sort of like a high score, like arcadey high score affair.
Yep.
Which still, I mean, I showed that to Sophie last year, and she didn't do too well, but she enjoyed it.
I never played it much on 4, but it's been on games after 4, and there was also a 3DS game, wasn't there, called The Mercenaries or something like that?
Yes, yeah.
Which was just that mode. And with that being on a handheld, I actually put a lot of time into that version of it, because it was just a nice pick up and play game for a handheld console, you know?
Yeah. There's also another thing about the design as well, was because this is getting a remake, did you know, in the vein of 2 and 3.
What 4 is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I knew there was a VR version, but I didn't realise it was getting a remake as well.
Yeah, it's getting a proper from the ground up remake.
Oh, nice.
And so I think that's next year or the year after that's meant to come out. But,
okay.
It's wondering how they would do it. Because one thing about it is when I played it a few years ago on the Wii, I kind of felt, because obviously this had the pointer controls. A lot of people say it's a definitive edition way to play it. But the one thing I thought was, it took me a while to adjust to the controls because I was used to dual analog moving around more freely. But one thing about this game is the game's design and the enemies work around the restricted controls. Like, enemies will run at you, but if they're a certain distance from you, they'll start walking, so which gives you the time to adjust and get the right aim and stuff, which I think's a good way around the controls.
Yeah.
So
I don't think they did that in the remakes, though, did they?
No, I don't remember.
I don't remember that happening in the remakes. I'm surprised they're remaking 4. I've got to be honest. I would have thought Code Veronica would have been the perfect one to remake next.
Yeah, or Zero, but
or Zero, yeah.
But anyway, and another thing about this was this was a GameCube exclusive.
Yes, I remember.
For the longest, and it was a big thing that it was going to be GameCube exclusive. And there was one of the executives at Nintendo who said, so he made this very bold statement about, it will always be a GameCube exclusive. It will never be on another console, sort of thing. And then, like a couple of months after launch, a PS2 version got announced. And but the thing is, it's such a bold statement saying that it was GameCube's the only console it'll be on, but it's on every console now.
Wasn't there like a Capcom 5 or something, or Capcom 7? There were like 7 games that were going to be exclusive to the Nintendo GameCube, one of which was Resi 4, and there were some others. But I seem to remember that at the time, like there was this big deal about this exclusivity with Capcom for a few games, and I don't know how many stayed exclusive, to be honest.
Nice. But like I said, people go on about Skyrim and GTA 5 just being on every console. Resident Evil 4 did it first.
Yeah, it's just literally everywhere, isn't it?
It's on every generation. All consoles since have had it in some shape or form.
Yeah,
and it's on mobile, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So anyway, Resident Evil 5, I think actually, although Geoffrey I think said he likes this one, I think we might have lost him a bit while talking about this one, because this is one that you and I played the whole way through over Xbox Live.
Yeah, it was. That's one of my favourite gaming memories. It was just so much fun.
Me too.
We played it with.
It was. We'd already both played through it, I think.
This was on hard mode or professional mode. We played it through.
Yeah. And because I don't do online co-op in games much.
No.
So I think this is the only time I've done it, really. At least the only time I've played for an entire game doing it. So this does stand out for me.
Yeah, it was great. It was so much fun. And we played, like I was saying earlier, about maxing out all the weapons and whatnot. And we were just absolutely bossing it by the end. We were so powerful. We were just smashing through professional mode. And it was so much fun, and I actually got the full gamer score for Resi 5.
Did you?
So 1,000 points. But then they brought out the 2 DLC packs. One was called was it like Lost in Nightmare or Lost in something, and another one Desperate Escape, something like that. But because the way, I don't know if it's the same on the PS3 as it would have been then, but if the game brought out DLC, it took away your 100% completion status.
Yeah, I remember that happened to me on Xbox as well.
Yeah, it was so annoying. So I lost that title because they added more points to it. I mean, that doesn't happen these days on a PS4 as far as I see. It just counts it as different. You still get your platinum, do you know what I mean? But that was really annoying. I remember being really annoyed when that happened.
Yeah, I was going to say that about the PlayStation. Like, you get a platinum trophy,
and
at least you've got that. But,
exactly. Yeah.
No, so I thought this was a fantastic co-op game as well. Because I mean, I always say when it comes to co-op, I only really enjoy playing co-op games if the game's designed for them. And by that I mean, if you play it single player, there's still 2 characters there.
Yeah.
You know, and this is one like something like Unravel 2 or Overcooked. So this is that one. So if you're playing it single player, you've still got the 2 characters to manage. So this is meant for. So yeah, Resident Evil 0. Maybe if that remake that with full co-op, you know.
I suppose they had to make 0 to work out how to do it later on, you know. And I'm not saying that 5's perfect, 'cause it's not. The AI character is very stupid. Let's be honest.
Oh yeah, again, why you need co-op.
Yeah, exactly right. If you're playing it with a friend, it's brilliant.
But then again, I experienced it with my friend being very stupid. But you know,
what are you talking about?
I'm talking about you.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's true. But no, it was good. It was a good time. I really enjoyed 5. And again, actually, I said earlier about Dead Rising when I went to visit you, and you showed me Dead Rising. You actually showed me 3 games that day. You showed me Dead Rising, Resi 5, and Arkham Asylum. And all 3 of those, I was like, oh my word! Like, this console is unbelievable. The Xbox 360. I couldn't believe it. Like, walking, you know, the start of Resi 5, you're going towards that village. Obviously, it's set in Africa. I don't think it ever states an actual country. It just says Africa. But and it's very orange, the game, isn't it? At the start, it's very sunburn. You know, it's got that very colourful look to it. That's not what Resident Evil at that point was known for. But it looked amazing. It looked beautiful on that screen. And again, very soon into it, you get ambushed, and it's just manic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I remember that first village, and I just couldn't, you know, I couldn't believe how good this game looked. And I bought myself an Xbox 360 soon after, off the back of seeing those few games, you know.
Yeah. But I remember something you said on that playthrough.
Yeah.
Because again, it'd been a while. I think you said it'd been a while since you'd used dual analog for aiming and stuff, because you'd been playing on the Wii.
The Wii, yeah, that's right.
But I remember you died at one point, and I said to you, "Are you gonna need some practice with the, you know, get some practice in?" And you said to me, "I'm gonna need a Wii remote." You said.
Yeah, it was hard to go back to aiming, and I still find that to this day. You know. It's, you know, there is just something about gyroscopic controls that when they're done right, and you can you know, really refine your aiming, it feels brilliant, doesn't it, you know? So
anyway, Resident Evil 6, I remember you sending me a text on that as well. I do remember what you say about Resident Evil games, I must say. I remember you telling me
what I said. What did I say?
I think you said you weren't enjoying it, and you said they've turned it into a straight up shooter. Yeah,
that's pretty much what they did. Yeah, it's a shame, because there's parts of it I do like. I like the fact they brought everyone back together effectively. You got Leon, Chris. I like the fact that they're separate stories, but Chris's campaign feels like a Call of Duty game. Leon's is probably the best of the lot, and then the other one, which is Wesker's son or something, isn't it? And it's the young girl from the second game. Yeah, I think so, or something like that. I can't remember now. And it's the, you know, the young girl from the second game. What's her name? Whatever her name is. It's her grown up. And
tell you what, I beat Leon's story in the remake, and at the end he meets Claire, and there's a young girl with her. I'm assuming it's that young girl.
Yeah, that's the young girl. Yeah.
Yes, I don't actually know who that character is.
Yeah, so she's the daughter of the main boss in 2. You know, the main.
Okay.
The main mutated Birkin, I forget his first name, but William Birkin, I think that's his daughter. I think her name's Shelley or something, but anyway, she is in 6 as a grown-up, but I just didn't care about her or the boy or the fella that she's with, so that kind of killed that part of that game for me. Chris's I didn't enjoy because it was way too action-based, and Leon's kind of saved the game a little bit. At least I enjoyed Leon's, but it just wasn't enough, you know. It just didn't feel enough for me. I don't hate it. I don't hate the game, but it wasn't. It was just standard, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I own it, but I've not played it.
It's okay. It's fine, you know.
I bought it because, you know, HMV, they would put, like, on the counter with any purchase, get this for £3.
Oh yeah,
and that was on there, so that's why I got it. But my favourite thing about it is that the 6 in the logo looks like a giraffe.
I know, yeah, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's it. Yeah. It's there forever.
I've always called it Resident Evil Giraffe. Yeah. Okay, so Resident Evil 7.
Yeah, I played the demo first. They released a demo.
Same here.
And it was really scary. It reminded me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Had a really strong Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe to it. And then bought the game when it came out. Again, very, very scary to start with, but kind of overdoes things, and you lose that a little bit as the game goes on, which, you know, we've said happens a lot. I did like 7. I liked it a lot. It just, I don't want to say it doesn't feel like a Resident Evil game, because it does, but it's such a departure in terms of characters, in terms of the viewpoint. It took a bit of acclimatization, you know?
Yeah. Because I played the demo before it came out, same as you, but I mean, I said to you that I didn't want to get the game just because I found it too scary for me. I thought I'm not going to enjoy the game. But it's not so much the atmosphere, it's just because I don't like jump scares, and because you're in the first person now, I thought the jump scares would feel worse. But I do own the game on PS4 now, and me and Sophie were gonna revive our Sony Sunday streams this month and do Resident Evil 7. I said to her I need Sophie with me because I refuse to play this on my own, and we did it the first Sunday of October this year. We started streaming it, and we just stopped because we were like, it got to the bit where you go you meet that cop at the window and you go to him in the garage, and then the guy comes up and I think he puts the spade through his head or something like that, and we were like, this is not the sort of it's not. I don't mind seeing things like that in the game, but we knew it was going to be a mature game, but we kind of want things more family friendly on our channel.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
If the violence was of Resident Evil 4 standards, that's fine, but it was a bit too much for our channel.
Well, the difference is that this is humans killing humans, isn't it? At that point, whereas
true.
Obviously, in the old games, it was, the zombies, as much as they might look scary, they were still this make-believe creature that, it's just a bit different, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I've not played Village.
No, I haven't played Village. Again, like I say, I'll wait for a price drop on it. But the only Resi game I've never finished is 6. I've finished every other game I've played, which is all of them bar Village. That's the only one I've never finished, and I've tried a couple of times now, and I just can't get through it. And it's, I say, I don't dislike it. It just isn't a Resident Evil game. It doesn't keep me hooked, And that's the only one. I've finished all the others. And I don't know if you wanted to go into spin-offs. I know we've been doing this a long time now, but I do just want to give at least a strong mention to. Nice one. Okay, I just want to mention Dark Side Chronicles, because it's one of my favourite games. It would have been one of my picks at the start, which was again it's a light gun on-rail shooter for the Wii, but it kind of remade these stories before they were remade. You know what I mean? It touches on. I own this one, but I've only played it with you when you showed it to me. That's what made me buy it, but I never got around to it. Oh, it's such good games. Do you remember when you showed it to me and my mum sort of came in the room and she was like, the lips aren't moving in time to the voices? yeah, I do remember, I'm assuming that they were synced up to the Japanese voice actors. But possibly. It might have just been that the lip syncing wasn't great at that time anyway, but just in terms of what it, like I say, obviously you'd had the remake of 1 and you had 0, which were probably the best looking games in the series at that point. But arguably, I can't think when it came out now, maybe not, maybe 5 and things like that were out by then, I don't know. But in terms of the older games, it was the Wii, wasn't it? So yeah, maybe. But in terms of the older games, which this story retreads, the last time we'd seen these characters, they looked like they looked in 2, the old 2. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So seeing them in this, this new way, it was great. It was really good, and I loved how it kind of wove the stories together. The light gun mechanics were fantastic. Playing it co-op with a zapper each was brilliant. Just such a good game. I really highly recommend that game. And that was the sequel, actually. The first one was Umbrella Chronicles.
Yeah, I've played more of that one, but I haven't got far because I find it really hard.
I don't think that's as good a game. I think maybe I just played the sequel first and then couldn't play the first one. It happens sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's Dark Side Chronicles is spot on. Such a good game.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the 3DS got Revelations.
Yep.
But also got you mentioned earlier the Mercenaries 3D, and that was the one, 'cause whenever you start up a game and that Resident Evil voice announces the title.
Yes, yeah.
It was at that point where I'm like, how far can they get this guy to go with saying the titles in that scary voices? And when you hear him go, Resident Evil, the Mercenaries 3D.
Yeah, loses its scare factor a bit, doesn't it, by that point?
Yeah. So again, that was
like
that was just a simple high score game. I got that one because it dropped to like £7 or something.
Yeah, it was dirt cheap, but it was good. I liked it. I enjoyed that one. And Revelations is a very good game. Very good game.
That was the one on the ship.
That was the one on the ship, and you had Jill. You were back to Jill, and there was another fella whose name, I think it was Enrico or something. I don't know. I don't remember. But and then you played as Chris, and he was with a girl who's, again, I can't remember her name. But Revelations, it brought back the fear factor in terms of the settings and the spooky environments, the abandoned ship, as you said. And then you had Revelations 2, which I don't know. I don't know if you've played 2, but
I've not played it. No.
I don't know. All the good work of 1 in terms of the settings, I kind of feel 2 lost it again. It just wasn't. I didn't enjoy that one as much. Had a fantastic raid mode, which is a bit like Mercenaries, but the story I just didn't enjoy as much as the first one.
One thing about Revelations I remember is because obviously it was designed for 3DS, so when games are designed for handheld, they sort of like to do sort of shorter chapters and things. It's meant to be for a short play session. But it adopted the whole American TV show of every time it's done, it goes previously on Resident Evil Revelations.
Yeah.
And then a flashback,
cool,
so it sort of had that cinematic feel to it.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a time before the Switch, so to have a game like that on a handheld was quite. I thought it looked fantastic. I thought it looked amazing on the 3DS, and it. It really did show what handheld gaming could be. Obviously, the 3DS didn't have the power to go much further, and I know the Switch is underpowered in terms of what is available elsewhere, but in terms of it being a handheld and the sort of games you can play on it, it is quite unbelievable, really, these days, what you can play on a handheld,
Have you played the Switch port of Revelations?
Yeah, I own it. I've got there was an American physical release that had Revelations 1 on the cartridge, and Revelations 2 was a download code.
Yeah, I knew. That's why I didn't get it, because of how huge the 2 download is.
Yeah, it's like 25 gig or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a bit annoying. That's Capcom though. They do these silly things, don't they?
And so the GTA trilogy's doing it as well, apparently.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah.
I was most upset about Spyro doing it.
Spyro as well did it. Yeah, it is frustrating. It is annoying.
What I was going to ask was, how much better does Revelations look on the console version rather than 3DS?
I mean, I don't. It's hard because I haven't played the 3DS one in a long time, but I don't remember it looking hugely different. You know what I mean? Like, it's probably a bit crisper, been a bit upscaled a bit, better resolution possibly, but I just think the 3DS game was such a handsome game for its time that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Even if the Switch version, still being a handheld, obviously looks better, it's not as noticeable because of how good that version looked for its time,
Yeah. But I remember just I always made sure I had headphones in while playing it, just to sort of immerse myself properly into
exactly.
it. You could just play it in bed with the lights off and all that as well. That was so cool.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was. The only thing I didn't really like about it was there was like a scanner in the game. You had to scan everything.
Yes, I remember that.
Do you remember? And you had to scan for items like that. That kind of got a bit tedious, but that's a minor complaint. It was such a good game.
Yeah. Is there any other Resident Evil games? I can't think of any.
Not that I've. Not really. I mean, you had Gaiden on the Game Boy Color, I think it was, but that was quite obscure. I say no. Actually, no, that's not true. There were quite a few. You had were they called Dead Aim or something on the PS2? What was it called? They were light gun games.
Oh, yes.
There wasn't actually a light gun available in some versions, depending what region you were playing it in. So they kind of just bombed. But I never played any of them. But there was that Raccoon City something, wasn't there?
Oh, the online
Xbox 360.
one. It's like an MMO one.
Yeah, so there's been quite a
Raccoon.
few. That's the one, yeah, Operation Raccoon City. There's been quite a few of other games.
There's one called Resident Evil Survivor.
Survivor, that's the one I was thinking of, sorry, yeah. You had Survivor, and I think there was a sequel to that.
Yeah, based on Code Veronica.
Right, yeah. But yeah, there's been a lot of games in the series, hasn't there?
There's Outbreak.
Outbreak as well, I think that was PS2, wasn't it, as well, possibly?
Yeah. Umbrella Corps. That was, I remember Umbrella Corps coming out.
Yeah.
And Resident Evil Resistance, which was last year apparently. Available for free when purchasing Resident Evil 3.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, I haven't played that. I know the one you mean, yeah.
It's 4 survivors against a mastermind player who can create traps, enemies and other hazards. Online multiplayer. That sounds pretty cool. Anyway, so I think we've exhausted that subject. We've been talking for how long?
Long time.
Nearly 2.5 hours. Wow. Yeah. It's nearly 1 in the morning, so I better wrap this up. Thank you so much for staying up with me.
No worries, mate. It's been good. It's, you know me. I love talking about horror.
Yeah. So we outlasted Geoffrey, and it's like only evening for him. So we did well.
There we go. Yeah, exactly right.
Cool.
Yeah.
And
thank you for having me on. Sorry, mate. I was going to say thank you for having me on. It's been really fun. It's been nice.
Yeah. It's been great to have you here to talk about. I wouldn't be able to hold conversations on my own with these games, so it's good to have you on here. So,
cheers, mate.
Yeah, so everyone check out Glen on SwitchUp. I'm sure everyone is still watching this video, and make sure you subscribe over at SwitchUp. Make sure you subscribe to our channel as well for more videos like this I'm going to do in the future as well. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.